To all who come to this ragged place, welcome. And since you're here when we start the show today, we've got Jack, aka Info Czar. He is a magician. He is a Twitch streamer. He is a Twitch streamer who streams magic on Twitch. Awesome individual. This is one of my favorite conversations I've ever had in this podcast. It is also one of the longest conversations I have ever had on this podcast. It may be the number one longest episode. We also have another first, which is he does some magic on the stream. Now look, if it's a bit long for you and you just want to see the trick, you can skip to the end. But I warn you, if you do that, you miss some of the context of the trick, because this guy's such a great magician that one thing does relate to the other. That's all I'm going to say. Hey, take it in chunks, which is a thing we talk about. We actually talked about the interesting trajectory of his life, which is crazy cool. Really interesting person, great perspective on a lot of things. I suggest you listen to this in whatever way that you can. Now, here's the thing. This is the Ragged World. It's an adult conversation, baby. So your virgin ears may hear something you didn't expect, and don't let that throw you. Look, this is all you really need to know to get into this episode. So without further ado, Jack, Info Czar, Ragged World, let's go. Yeah, no, it's on. We'll call it on right now. So
it's on.
It's on.
The red light is on.
The red light is on. We're ready to rock. So look, Jack, aka Info Czar, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it very, very much. I've been looking forward to talking to you for a while. So you know what? Why don't I start? Well, we were just talking about decks of cards. You're a magician. I know you because of doing magic on Twitch. After I started my stream, I started to find all these amazing people. You're one of the first ones that I ran into. I was lucky to do so, I find. And we can always start at the beginning with the who are you, what do you do, and all that kind of stuff. But we were just talking about cards, your Hellion cards. I'm going to ask a dumb question to start, just to get it out of the way, because I'll probably ask you a lot of dumb questions. And this, we might as well get there. You're a magician. You got a lot of cards.
Oh yeah.
Around how many decks of cards do you have?
If I had to just totally guess, because I don't keep an inventory or anything.
Randomly, approximately, how many decks do you think you got floating around?
I would think a conservative estimate would probably be 250.
Wow, 250.
Floating
That's
around.
Amazing.
I mean, let me do like a back of the envelope thing. Just right here. There's about 50 right off camera on the desk right here. There's probably another 50 down here because they don't fit up here anymore.
We got to 100.
Maybe more, actually. There's a couple of bricks behind me. A brick of cards. When you buy a lot of cards, you can buy them in a brick, which is 12 decks in a box.
Decks. So a couple more bricks. So it's something like 230, 240 already. Or no, 140.
Yeah, maybe. So when you buy a brick of cards, this is what you get.
United States Playing Card Company.
It's just like, this is a mixed brick.
Cohort.
So like, I really liked these racing green cohorts. They were on sale.
Racing
cards
green.
are expensive. When they go on sale, I'll buy a brick, But yeah, it's a problem. I'm kind of out of control. I don't collect them, but if like special cards come out and they cost $20 a deck, and I know they're going to sell out because there are collectors. There are plenty of people who collect playing cards. And I'm like, okay, so like when the new Noctobers came out for Halloween, they glow under black light. They're super cool. They were like $15 a deck. You could save a little if you bought a bunch together, but I knew these were going to sell out. There was no question. And I also knew I wanted one for me, and I knew I wanted to be able to give some away on stream. And so I bought them as soon as the announcement came out. I was like, all right, I was out somewhere. I like put an order in on my phone. And I was lucky to get what I got, but I'm not the person who gets the cards and then never opens them, keeps them mint and then sells them on eBay or anything like that. I just like cards. I love playing cards. So I'm always tearing them open. I'll often buy 2 decks. So there's the one to mess with and the one to save to mess with another day. But I always feel it's like when you buy stickers, it's like you don't want to put it on something
Because then it's
because now
done.
you can't put it on something else. You've used it, you know. So yeah, I'll get like a bunch of the same deck.
And I'm sure there are
Thinking
some
someday.
tricks. Yeah.
Sorry.
You said you're thinking someday you might use them.
Yeah, yeah, you never know. You never know. So, these Black Hellions, I'm not even all that fond of them, but I probably have like six of these. I just opened this one the other day because I couldn't find the red ones that I wanted to use.
Uh, well,
I should get organized.
I'm assuming there are some decks, like some tricks that you do that require you to have a completely unopened pack at some point or another, right?
It can be helpful. Certainly, there are some tricks where it's a lot more impressive if you start with a sealed deck,
Mm-hmm.
because then people know that, like if you're in person, you can just hand a sealed deck to somebody and have them open it and take it out and shuffle it. And then it's a convincer that, there's nothing funny about the deck itself. You can't do that on Twitch, sadly. People either have to trust me or, there's always that thing. There's a lot of magic theory about as soon as somebody has somewhere to go of, well, it must have been this, it's not as impressive. You don't get that feeling of being a kid again and anything is possible, which is kind of what you're shooting for with a magic trick, right?
Yeah.
It's to get somebody's brain back to being five and just being like, what?
Sort of just
Um,
not knowing, having kind of an innocence.
right. So it's the kind of thing that doesn't really work across this kind of gulf because I can't let you shuffle the cards. I
Mm.
can't let you open a brand new deck. It's never going to be as impressive, but it can be impressive enough, and I enjoy doing it and I don't have anybody else to watch. So it's really good for me, to be able to just pop on a Twitch and
Yeah.
mess with some stuff that I've been working with. And, people will like it or they don't like it. I'll get good feedback. And sometimes it's really impressive. Sometimes, things just work great and people don't have that escape route of, well, it must have been a camera trick or it must have been, like every once in a while, everything just clicks perfectly and it's a
I've
good
been
day.
I've been having a blast on your stream. Honestly, from
Hmm.
I try to catch it every single time I can. Because like a couple of the ones that really struck me are oftentimes the elaborate ones. I like when there's a bit of a story. You have an aliens trick you did for the Halloween season. Amazing.
That was
Really
fun. Yeah.
surprising. Also, some of the serial killer tricks, which
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
obviously, seem to have enjoyed a lot. Took liberties a little bit with my shout out for you on Twitch there, but
Fine with me. I have no problem with that. Yeah, I mean, a lot of times what I'm doing is, and most magicians do this. There's a corpus of existing classic tricks, and then there's people creating new stuff all the time. But it's a lot like academia. I've never seen anything like it other than academia.
hmm,
Magicians are obsessed about giving credit for what they're using as they're building their new routines because nothing is ever completely new, so if you um, read a book, not mass market magic books where you can go to a random bookseller and just like get a mass market book or get something on Amazon, but books that are written by magicians for magicians and are generally not available through normal channels, the crediting is it's intense. It's something you don't find outside of like a university setting where it's like this specific move probably originated in 1946 from this guy published in this journal, and it really is. It's expected that if you create something new and put it out there, that you state what your influences were and all the pieces that you collected and put together, where did that come from, and so on.
hmm.
It's a fascinating it's a fascinating group of people. Magicians
So
are really odd that way.
why do you think that is? Is it curiosity, or is it like something about the fact that it's kind of difficult to have thought of something like that to begin with? Being that this sort of, I do find that magic a lot of times is you're getting someone to really believe that a thing that's impossible just happened, and also hiding what actually happened. But you have to come up with a way. Somebody somewhere along the line has to come up with a way. Do you think that
Right.
has something to do with it, or why do you think
Yeah,
that's the
it's
case?
definitely that. It's also there's if you do happen to come up with something that is original, you don't want somebody else ripping it off, you know? So it's very much a self-policed community in that sense, you know?
Mm,
Like if I come up with something new and I put it out there, and it kind of happened to me, but the assumption is that people are coming up, it's like what was it, Leibniz and Newton, right? They both independently came up with calculus,
oh,
and no, you build on what other, all the math that came before. You can kind of figure out, oh, actually, and it keeps going. So something came out fairly recently that used something that was in one of the first tricks I ever released. And it was very, very specific. I mean, it was exactly the same thing was being done in the exact same way. And it seemed like, at first, I'm like, that might be too much of a coincidence, but I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. It was just a matter of independent discovery. We both
mm,
came up with the same idea, and that's cool. But yeah, generally speaking, um, I think magicians also know how bad it gets when you do have those disputes of somebody just came out with something they're selling, and another magician is like, that is exactly the same as this thing that I published 2 years ago. And then it's back and forth, like, ours is a little different and we weren't aware of yours and we're crediting you, but we're still selling it. And then the guy's like, well, if you're still selling it, you're making money off of my idea, and it's like nobody likes that. Nobody
mm.
enjoys these kind of weird tussles where people just have to get angry about things. It's like we're all in it to have fun. A lot of people are in it to make money, but those aren't mutually exclusive, hopefully.
Hmm.
I'm not in it to make money yet, but
Not yet. But
eventually,
I feel like that sounds a little bit like being a stand-up comedian in a way. You could say like, oh, these
jokes. Yeah.
similar premises or similar jokes, and it
Yep.
again, you're subverting people's expectations in a sense.
Hmm. Yeah.
Well, this is how I subverted their expectations, and you did the same thing, and I guess you could go
Yeah.
back and forth on who got it first. I'll tell you, with writing, it's like that. When I was writing comic books, I found that a lot of the ideas I would go and read a brand new comic that came out from like Jeff Lemire or something, and he had all these new this story about androids and robots, and I was like, this is everything I've been writing, and I know he doesn't know it for sure. He doesn't
Yeah.
know it, but they were so similar. Each step that would happen, and I was like, okay, we maybe we grew up in similar ways and had similar
Yep.
influences, and that's what's going on here. I remember once I came up with a story that was okay. We're in the future, and I have a person who's disabled. They're in a wheelchair, and they're going to be the best at putting their mind into this avatar. And then I went and saw Avatar, and I was like, well, I'm not writing. I'm not writing this story. It's
Yeah.
over. I'm done with it. So I assume that kind of happens, but at the same time, somebody is probably a thief. Their thieves exist, so that
They
must
do.
happen
They
too.
absolutely do. And like in any other kind of business, I think there are, I'm not going to name any names, obviously, but there are people who have reputations in magic as
Mm.
people who are just even like a lot of what happens in, people are like, well, how do you learn magic, and it's like, well, you start getting books out of the kids library. It's just like you can start super basic, and once you know that kind of thing and magicians see that you're serious about it, then maybe they start letting you in on some of the other stuff. And if you're lucky, maybe you find somebody who really takes you under their wing
Mm.
and mentors you. And that's probably the best way to do it. I don't have a mentor. I'm just picking bits and pieces out wherever I can. Um, but yeah, it's you do find out about, so one of the ways you do find out about new magic and learn new things is lectures. Magicians will
Really?
give lectures to other magicians, and you pay to attend the lecture, you pay to attend the conference at which the lecture is happening, and they'll show you what they've been working on, and then and they decide, every magician gets to decide what they want to release to other people, whether for free or for sale, and what they're keeping for themselves because they want to keep being It's my thing. I want to be the only person doing it for the next 5 years, and then maybe I'll release it for sale to other magicians to learn, or I'll teach it at lectures and so on. But yeah, there are magicians who are known for, going on the lecture circuit and teaching other people's tricks without permission.
Oh, and then getting
It's
paid.
just like, and people in the audience are like, that's not yours. You should not be, and they're like, oh, whatever, So there are people who don't respect these boundaries. And the boundaries are pliable in a sense, right? They're kind of spongy. Because there's the classic thing, you're a little kid, you get the magic book out of the library, and it's like, never tell anyone how the trick is done. And yeah, but also, where do you draw that line? Like, if you've got established magicians going on YouTube and teaching tricks on YouTube to anybody who wants to search for the trick, to some degree that's totally fine, but to another degree it's not. Like,
how do you feel about that?
I'm very much ambivalent. I definitely feel. Yeah, I mean, I agree very much that you don't get new magicians without that kind of thing happening.
True.
And you want new magicians. You don't want the art form to just shrivel up and die. But at the same time, it's a unique situation, I think, in that the art form ceases to function if everybody knows how the stuff is done. It kills the art one way or the other. If you keep it too close to the chest, too close to the vest, you don't have anybody new carrying on the tradition. But if you expose it to everybody, then there's no audience. Because if you know how the trick is done and I do the trick for you, you're not entertained by it. You don't get the sense of wonder that is the goal of a magic trick. So, there's a magician who wrote an amazing sort of speculative piece that I loved, which was kind of about the last spectator, the last available spectator. Because the idea was, magic was being exposed more and more on the internet. You could watch magic and be like, that was amazing, and then go on and just search and be like, oh, okay, now I know how it's done. So magicians basically got together and paid to keep one person shielded from everything. And so eventually every magician is only performing their magic for this one person.
Wow.
That's the last spectator in existence. And, obviously it's making a point. This is satire that's making a point. But I thought it was a clever way of going about that. So yeah, it's a bell curve like anything else, right? If you're too far on one end or too far on the other end, everything goes away. You got to strike that happy medium. And you want new people to be able to find out just enough to come into the community and start learning stuff from other magicians, but
not so much you don't have any guests, any spectators anymore. Or
well,
that everybody's too.
Oh yeah, old timers. But like a lot of the people who have been doing magic for 50 years and such think. Well, I don't say a lot. There are definitely magicians who think that the internet is the worst thing to ever happen to magic, because people can just search for a trick and find out how it's done. And again, I'm ambivalent about that. I feel like that is both a good thing and a bad thing. There are plenty of people, including people in my stream, who say over and over again, they're just there to get that sense of wonder. The last thing they want to know is, how is it done? They don't want to know. They're never going to go looking. And they're also angry when somebody in chat was like, I think it's done this way. They're like, don't even talk about it. We don't want to know, So we try to keep that out of the chat. But generally speaking, there's different kinds of people who watch magic. Like there are people who are not entertained by it other than as a puzzle. It's just, well, how is it done? I'm going to try to figure it out, and those people are generally not fun to perform to because they're not really enjoying the performance. They're just doing a puzzle, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But certainly if I'm performing live for a bunch of people, if I spot that guy, I'm probably not picking them as a spectator because there's no back and forth. It dies on the vine.
It's a different intention coming from that person.
Right. You want to pick somebody who's into it because they're playing along with the fantasy. Nobody believes that the magic is real.
What?
And that's the point. right? Nobody goes to a play and believes that the actors are the characters. Nobody's believing that the guy who gets shot on stage in the play is actually dying.
Yeah.
But human brains are really good at empathizing with fictional layers of things. And so that's what, magic is exactly the same, right? You don't believe that I have special powers, and I never try to make you think I have special powers. But we're all kind of playing into, it's like a play. My role is weird things are happening. And, you can absorb that without literally thinking that magic is happening.
That's amazing.
And that's,
I do wonder about that. I'm on the fence sometimes about learning it. I wouldn't say that I want to be a magician, but I do sometimes want to know how some of the tricks are done, but more on the thinking side of things, because I'm thinking like, okay, these guys who are doing illusions and tricks have to be thinking outside of the box in some way or another. And just having some access to that kind of thinking, like, oh no, what's impossible is actually possible, at least visually. I think is something, I think it is something. Do you feel like what about magic do you feel like would be beneficial for people to actually learn or know, that we maybe don't realize?
Yeah, I am definitely a huge believer that everybody would benefit by learning a little bit of magic, in many ways. And that's one of the reasons in my Twitch channel, if you're subscribed to my Twitch channel, one of the side benefits of that is in my Discord, there's a separate section that's only available to subscribers where, we can arrange a time. We'll meet up over a video chat and I'll teach you some beginner level magic. I think everybody would benefit from that. Many reasons. One, the most obvious is, if you've got nieces or nephews, it's it's not a bad idea to have a couple of magic tricks to pull. I mean, I used to volunteer in a kindergarten classroom 4 days out of 5. And that was the big guns. That was when you have a kid who is crying, screaming, inconsolable, nothing is working to calm this kid down. They're just completely over the top. What never failed was being able to say, listen, if you can calm down a little bit, maybe we go over here, I'll show you a magic trick.
Nice.
Worked every time. Just like tears stop and they're just looking at you like, okay. You go over and you do, and amazing. So there's lots of reasons why it's useful, but here's the most important one. The way magic works is by fooling you, but that's not really true. I mean, what really happens is what a magician does is not fool you. A magician sets up the conditions for you to fool yourself. It works the same way as writing. A writer, as you know, doesn't really write everything that's happening. The goal is to write just enough where everything happens in the reader's head.
That's so true.
Right? You're writing one sentence. You're writing 6, maybe 6, 7 words. And everybody who reads it, if you've done it right, gets exactly what you were trying to say with a tiny amount of language. But you're providing the conditions for the brain to do what it needs to do. So magicians do the same thing, but with deception. We're giving you just enough to hang yourselves. We're giving you just enough to fool yourself, because brains are hilariously exploitable. Brains are wired in such ways that there are a million shortcuts, because think about it. If your brain had to process everything that's coming in through all your senses all the time, you couldn't function. You'd be eaten by a tiger, right? So we would never have evolved to this point because we never would have survived long enough to reproduce. So we evolved with brains that can make shortcuts. We can make assumptions. We pick up on changes to patterns because the pattern is background noise. You don't want to be processing that. Optical illusions. You know about optical illusions. You're looking at something that is definitely one way and you're definitely seeing it as another way. And that's because brains and eyes don't work the way a video camera does, So when you learn the basic principles of even beginner level magic, it kind of puts you a little bit more, you understand a little bit more how messed up brains are and how imperfect memory is. And that's super important, I think, to keep in mind, because when you rely 100% on your memory, like I saw this, I know this is what happened.
Mm.
I can prove to you, and any magician can prove to you that that is exploitable. And a lot of the techniques that magicians are using to let you fool yourselves are probably not known, not knowingly. They're the same techniques that are being used on you by advertisers, by
Mm.
marketers, by politicians. It's the same stuff. And so if you know a little bit of magic, you might be a little bit less susceptible to people who are trying to fool you, possibly not to entertain, but to take advantage of you.
Wow. That's incredible.
So,
That's
yeah, I mean,
incredible.
I really do. I really do believe that. I really believe everybody would benefit in on some level just by learning, just a little bit of how magic works. So,
Yeah, you might not trust your own, because this is what you're saying is in a way maybe people are trusting their own experience a little too much. Like I
right.
saw it, it went like that. Look, I heard the guy say that on TV, and that's what it is, I guess. So I'm on this side now,
Well,
and it's a
you
hundred
know, you
percent.
might you might have had this experience. I certainly have. I feel like probably a lot of people have, where you may have a memory from childhood that's very vivid
Mm,
of something that happened in, fairly young childhood, and you've carried that around for decades. And then one day you're talking to your parents about it, and they're like, "Oh, that's not how that happened. It's a little bit different." But you've got a vivid memory that, like, Uncle Frank was the one who cut the turkey.
mm.
And they're like, "Oh, no, no, no!" Before the table collapsed and everything. The dog ran in, ran off of the turkey, and they're like, "Oh, no, no, it was Aunt Maureen. Aunt Maureen was the one cutting your turkey." But you're sure you remember it was Uncle Frank, and then they bring out, the high-8 video, or the old film, or they have photographs of it or something that you didn't know existed, and you're looking at it. I'll be damned, it was Aunt Maureen, but you're
Maureen's
so
there after
sure
all.
you remember it was Uncle Frank. That kind of thing, because one of the things that they're pretty sure, I mean, they don't know, I guess, really how memory works, how brains work. I mean, we're learning more all the time, obviously. But one of the things that my understanding is that they think every time you recall something from your memory, you're re-encoding it.
Mm.
Okay, so it's a little bit like, every time you open a JPEG compressed graphic and then save it as another JPEG, you're losing a little bit. It's changing every time you do that. So
Wow.
every time you remember something, you recall it, you're basically, you're saving it again. And the next time you remember it, it might be slightly different. And we have a tendency to direct things as we're doing that. It might be the way we want them to be, or, could be anything. Some kind of psychological thing made me turn Aunt Maureen into Uncle Frank.
Yeah.
Something about it. Maybe I just liked Uncle Frank better. Maybe I just thought he was a funnier person, and it was a funny moment. And so my brain eventually made me remember, oh, yeah, it was Uncle Frank who did that.
Just recompiled
So,
the whole memory into Uncle Frank. Like
exactly.
maybe you just didn't remember who it was, and you're used to Uncle Frank, and he was there a lot of times, and
Right.
your memory, they just stole that from another part of your brain and slipped it right in.
Could be anything. Could be
Wow.
anything like that. It could be you had a dream, at some point that was a vivid dream. I run into people a lot who are very, very convinced in their own memories. Um, and oftentimes I'm like, that's going to be a really fun person to do magic for. Because those are usually the people that get fooled the hardest from certain kinds of techniques, which rely on memory.
Oh, amazing.
Because that's one of the things magicians will mess with, is there are principles. I mean, you can look this up. You can look up psychological experiments that they've done of implanting memories in people just by talking to people about things.
Really? And they believe
There's
they
a famous
remember now?
one. Trying to remember. There's a famous one that involved, I think, like implanting memories of something that happened in a mall, and they're able to just talk to people, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that totally happened." And no, it was made up. It was for the experiment.
Really? And people
Um,
just now remember it like as if they actually remembered it?
as if, yeah, they're like, oh yeah, you're right.
Wow.
I do remember that. It's some wild stuff. And
Hmm.
I remember when I was just getting back into magic, so like 6 or 7 years ago. I've been in, like in and out my whole life. I've loved magic since I was like 5. But it was only about 6 or 7 years ago I got really into it, and just basically when I realized, oh, I can actually afford more than one deck of cards now, as opposed to when I was in 5th grade. So maybe I can actually start doing this stuff. But trying to remember the specific kind of thing. All right, so I did a trick for a friend of mine. It was just a card trick. And he was like, that's amazing. He was like one of my favorite people to perform for because he's very much in the, I'm just going to be absorbed in the wonder of this and be taken for a ride. It's just fun. Everybody's having fun. But he was blown away by whatever it was I did. I don't remember what it was, but I do know that as soon as it was over, one of the roommates came walking through the house and was like, what, reacting to that was amazing. What just happened? And the guy I did the trick for turns to the roommate and starts describing the trick that I just did. And that wasn't what happened at all.
Hmm.
It was like, I mean, it was close, but he made it so much better in the retelling.
Wow.
And, I was, trying not to react to that. But that was an important lesson because I was like, okay, so people will immediately misremember what just happened. And if you're the right kind of person, you're automatically misremembering it to be even more impressive than it was.
Okay.
And I've then found out you can structure magic routines to sort of foster that. Like
Really?
basically plant false memory as you're going through the trick.
Amazing. So
You know,
I guess
like
that's
I don't
one
think
of
I'm
the
giving
things.
away too much to say that if magicians are watching this and they're like, "Shut
Okay,
up,"
yeah.
I'm like, "We'll stop it there." But this is the thing: memory is malleable and exploitable and imperfect, and it's an important thing to keep in mind, whether you're a magician or not. I think
Wow.
so.
Well, I don't want to ruin anything at all. So if you can't answer the question, then don't. But I'm wondering what types of things do you think about when you're creating a new trick or maybe working with something? Like you say, there's a lot of different pieces that go into it. I'm curious, what types of things are you thinking about? And not necessarily what's the trick or how is that done, but
Yeah,
like what do you have to think about? It's like, okay, this is going to be a new trick. So now I need to take into account XYZ.
I think the way most people do it is they have an idea of what they want the effect to be. Like they want it to be, they're thinking from the terms of the spectator. This is what happened. This is what I experienced. And it was magical and amazing and wondrous. And then they work backwards and try to figure out a method. Like, how can I make that happen? How can I make somebody think that's what happened to them?
Mm,
I usually don't go in that direction. I don't create that much original magic yet. Um, but when I do, I take a really odd route, which is sometimes I'll stumble upon a method for something that I don't even, so I don't even know what the trick's going to be, but I figure something out and I'm like, I got to use this somehow. And then I try to come up with a trick to use that method. And so a lot of the earlier stuff that I came up with was really, it's like cart before the horse kind of thing.
like a
Um,
reverse engineering kind of situation.
yeah, I think the best magicians and the best magic that's created goes in the other direction. They start with the narrative. They're like, this is what happens. Now, how can I make that happen?
See, the
And
thing
then
too,
you go
there
looking for methods.
does seem
But
to
like I would
be.
stumble upon a weird chemical process and I'd be like, or I'd fixate on it. Like one of the first tricks I created, I kind of got fixated with the idea of I want some way for something I write to change into something else.
Mm,
And I just went, figuring out, just trying to figure out how can I make this happen. And eventually I found a way that I loved and I built a huge routine around it that it's not even, it's less a magic trick and more just like a weird thing that happens over the course of 20 minutes while you're talking to someone on Zoom. It was the idea. It's like a very
oh,
long, involved thing, and there's a whole backstory with a secret society and a sealed letter that I've got that we open on camp. It was a lot of fun, and I've done it on stream a couple of times. And most magicians would, I think, argue that it's a terrible trick in the sense that there's no theatricality to it. It's, it's not the kind of thing you could perform on stage. I tried once. I actually did turn it into a version that was done for a magic show on Zoom. And it works, but it was like cut down to 7 minutes. The mechanics were all there. It went over well. But the joy of the original routine for me is that it is a conversation. And it leads into weird conversational things about, well, what city would you go to if you could go anywhere for free? And, you don't cut that short. You have that conversation, you talk to somebody about it, but that's all part of the routine, and it leads you into this other thing. And then by the end of the thing, it might be half an hour later and brains explode, because they're not expecting a trick per se, and that was the kind of thing that I was going for that. But yeah, like I say, that came out of, I want to have something where writing changes visibly from one thing into another right in front of somebody's face. And I eventually found a method for it that worked after a lot of false starts.
Does that happen a lot where you just, there's just a lot of going back to the drawing board on the regular?
Yeah. I did my one and only stage performance last February for Boston Magic Lab, which is kind of a, it's a little bit, they bill themselves as an open mic night for magic, for magicians. And it's monthly in Boston, anytime not over the summer, because I think it's run by people who are also gone for the summer for, they're here for university and things like that.
Oh.
And my girlfriend found it first and took me to it for my birthday. And I was like, this is amazing. I'm going to come back every month. And then that was January of 2020. So, of course, I got to go to one more before everything shut down. And then they moved it online. And so now it's over Zoom. And they had people who are not in Boston participating. And people in Germany were watching, which was pretty cool. And so I did the trick I was just talking about with the writing changing as part of that. And then I was supposed to, they went back live and I got a slot and I was going to go do the thing live. And then that got canceled because cases skyrocketed again. That was like January of 2022, like when things suddenly went like that. So they moved it online again. And I did another original thing that I created specifically for online, which was, the Torn and Restored Zombie, which you may or may not have seen at this point.
I think I might have,
But in February, they're like, okay, we haven't given away your slot. We're moving back, things are coming down. We're moving back live. Do you still want it? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And I was going to do this routine by a magician I like very much, that when he does it on stage in front of a lot of people, it's a card trick that works, in a stage scenario, like a parlor setting. And when he does it, it takes about 3 minutes. And I had a 7-minute slot, I thought. For the January show, they said 7 minutes. And I was like, okay, I've never done this on stage. 7 minutes to do a 3-minute routine is probably about right for me. Also, I talk a lot, as you know.
Yeah.
So,
Twitch
as
streamers,
you can tell
man,
right
so.
now, the ears are, yeah. But
you have to be able to talk if you're going to be on Twitch. You got to be able to talk to yourself, basically.
But I mean, so I was working on this particular trick that this guy had put together. And then they're like, okay, you've got a 15-minute slot. I was like, oh, okay, because I guess somebody had dropped out or something between January and February. So now I suddenly have 15 minutes instead of 7.
Okay.
And I said, okay, well, I can either try to come up with something from scratch or, go looking for somebody's thing that I can learn that'll fill that space. Or I could just do 2 things. But then, I don't really want to do 2 disjointed tricks. I mean, it's perfectly valid for people to do that, but that wasn't what I was interested in doing. So I took this trick and I built a narrative around it where I am basically a scientist. I already had a lab coat with my name on it because my girlfriend got me and my daughter matching lab coats years ago. And I was like, all right, this is cool. But the idea of being,
as you do, I guess.
As you do, right. It was perfect.
You're going to have to tell us why at some point, but please.
Well, we had a daddy-daughter mad science week one week when they were home for home from school for a week, and I took a week off of work, and we made the baking equivalent of a turducken called the pie cookie.
Okay.
So we baked a chocolate chip cookie inside of a cherry pie inside of a chocolate cake.
What?
Yeah.
This sounds difficult. I mean, I don't know.
It was not easy, but we had a good time, and it turned out great. I still have photos.
Amazing.
And we spent the rest of the week working on their first ever cosplay, and finished out the week by I think there were like 11 at the time, and then we went to Comic-Con, Boston Comic-Con, and in this Sally costume from Nightmare Before Christmas.
Phenomenal.
And it was great. We spent all week. I'm sewing, drawing things. But
and so you had this lab coat, so now you got 15 minutes.
I had the lab coats, and so I was like, okay, can I turn this aura card routine into something that's bigger? And so I prefaced it. I got obsessed with this idea of, okay, here's how we're going to do this. Because the original routine is 3 people in the audience pick cards, and they put them back in the deck. A 4th person shuffles the deck, and then the magician can, by touching the first person's finger, can go through the cards and find their card. Okay, great. 2nd person touches their finger. This time I'm going to do it blind. Takes the deck, puts it in the pocket, and then just reaches in, pulls out their card, blind from the pocket. And then the 3rd person touches their finger. They're like, that was weird. Try it again. Like, I think you can find it yourself. Reach into my pocket, pick any card you want that feels right to you. Turns out to be their card. It's a great routine.
Nice.
3 to 5 minutes if you're good. I figure 7 minutes because I'm not. And then and now I've got 15. So what I'm going to do. So again, the routine's called Aura. And so I said, let's just go hog wild with this. I wanted to come in as a scientist and go through this whole thing where we're not just going to, you're going to touch the card and I'm going to touch your finger and, read the aura. I had to develop this whole thing. I spent months on this. Well, a month. Up all night, buying all kinds of stuff that I ended up trying this. It didn't work, whatever. But I wanted to make film plates so that I could, have them hold their hand up, hold a film plate 6 inches in front of it, and then basically take a photograph of their aura that way.
Oh, that's
so I
cool.
do this with 3 people, and I put these blank white glass plates up on a stand on the stage. And as they're choosing cards and we're doing all that business, people are seeing the auras of the hands develop in real time on the plates. Like they're slowly fading in different colors. And I got obsessed with that. I'm like, I want this to be the thing. And then I wanted the ending of the trick to be the backs of all the cards changed to the color of each person's aura. I'm like, okay, that's a 15-minute routine, and it turned out to be a 17-minute routine because, of course, I ran long. But but yeah, that was the whole thing. And then I just spent like
awesome.
6 weeks doing nothing. Every spare moment, I was not sleeping. I was like, how can I make this happen? How can I, So that was one instance where I had a narrative first, and then I was like, I need a method. I need some way. I basically want a Polaroid of somebody's aura. And it took a lot of doing, but I eventually got it working, and I was thrilled.
That sounds like a fantastic trick. And like
it was fun. It exists on video. They actually did film it. I'll have to send you the link. It's on YouTube.
I'd love to see it.
It is out there.
Definitely. So yeah, no, I'd like to see it. Also, even just I love the idea of the narrative, and I wanted to talk about the thing that you said earlier too, where you have something written on in an envelope, right? And you turn that into kind of a conversational trick. And that you said that, hey, it's not even really, a lot of magicians would say that's not even really that much of a trick or whatnot, because you're having this conversation. But I think there's some genius in that, personally, because essentially what you're doing is making it, everybody, I think at some point would now forget, in a way, the conversation went here, it went there, it was whatever. Oh, we just talked about that particular city in the middle of this conversation, and now, oh yeah, by the way, it's on the envelope. And that nonchalant feeling, I think, probably adds something like a lot to that trick. So I don't know. I would think it is actually kind of amazing to go the other way sometimes, like the antithesis in a way of the trick you just described that has like some really big, pieces, and it takes months and months, but yet, those two things are kind of equally good in different ways. That's just a thought.
Yeah, there's. I mean, I agree with you. There's different kinds of magic that are used in different scenarios, and the best, for my money, the very best writer in Magic um, deals basically exclusively with what I think he would term social magic. He doesn't perform on stage. He doesn't perform in formal settings. All of the magic he does is just he's out with friends and he starts talking, about this weird thing that's going on. And he's got routines that last weeks.
Whoa.
Like they'll build up over time and people don't even understand. It's like every time they come over, there's something slightly different in his apartment, like things like that. Just
Whoa.
really, and that was sort of the genesis for the idea of, well, and in fact, that routine was basically a version of something that he had come up with, where the change didn't happen in front of people's eyes because it didn't need to. In that kind of social setting where you're hanging out with somebody on the couch, the trick was structured in such a way where you're like, well, that didn't work, and you crumple it up and throw it on the table. But later on, when they check it, it's different. So
Mm,
there's time in between. I needed something that would work over Zoom, where it never leaves your sight. And so that was the idea of that. But
that is
the
cool.
general presentation was all taken from this other thing.
Wow.
I just
Okay.
I just changed it into something that could be done live over Zoom. So
That's
yeah,
gotta
everything's
be
situational.
that's gotta be a whole
Everything's
context there too, right? Where you're now making this effort. Like that's again, that's not something we've seen on Twitch a lot. I don't think there are that many magicians on Twitch. I know of
yeah,
like four, maybe. I know of you, and
yeah.
then
I think there's
everyone
four.
else and that's really it. Everyone I've seen in your chat, basically. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
feel like there's a whole nother game. What makes what are some of the challenges with Zoom, or just maybe
Oh,
some
it's
of the
wild.
benefits in a way? But I guess
Yeah, some things are way, way easier. Some things are way, way harder. Certain things that are very easy to do live person to person are literally impossible. But also things that would be literally impossible in person can become possible in this kind of environment.
hmm,
So it's a very different sort of thing. A lot of the methods, techniques, strategies, and so on carry across, but need to be changed. But also, you need to be able to throw things out the window because it's just like, again, I can't have you shuffle a deck of cards.
yeah,
So any trick where it hinges upon knowing, 100% for sure that those cards are mixed is probably not a trick I'm going to do on Twitch because there's no way for me to guarantee that. The best I can do is show you them mixed and put them back together and then do a thing, which is pretty good. Absolutely, that's pretty good. But if you have a trick where what really makes it work is the fact that 100% for sure that I didn't touch the cards.
yeah,
It all happens in your hands. You
that's
know,
gone.
yeah, you can't do that.
Wow.
Um, so like, there's a streamer who's local to me. He's like a half-hour drive from me. He was having his 1 year anniversary stream, and I said, "Any chance you want a live magician for your party? Because I'll drive over. I'll do magic live in person for you, and we'll both be on camera. For those segments." And so I did that, and that was great for me because now it's like I can do tricks that rely on the fact that there's a living human body
Finally.
interacting. And I was like, "Do you have any requests?" And he's known for showing his feet on camera. It's a whole thing. I don't know,
Okay.
but he's like,
And
"I
I
want foot
don't
magic." I'm
I
like,
don't
"I don't
love
even
the
know what foot
way.
magic is, but we'll figure it out." So I did a card to shoe thing where he picks a card, he wrote on it, put it back in the deck. We lose it in the deck. I give him the deck. I tell him, find your card. He doesn't find it. It's not in there. I'm like, okay, great. I think we got it. Right shoe or left shoe? And he chose right shoe, and very cleanly take the shoe off, hold it up, shake it, one card drops down from the toe, and it's the signed card. Like,
Nice.
that's the kind of thing. It's not going to be interesting over Twitch,
Got it.
but over Twitch, people watching me and him do it live together worked really well.
That
And
sounds
that card
great.
is still on his fridge in the background every time he's on stream now.
Oh wow, amazing. Although,
Yeah,
you
it's
know, I
fun.
I will say I don't like the way you called him a live human body, but
Well,
I mean,
I got to draw the distinction.
fair, of
Um,
course.
Pre-corpse.
Pre,
I used to say pre-corpse. This is
what's that?
better. I'm told. I'm told by people that this is less off-putting than pre-corpse. So
Got it. Okay, cool. Well,
yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. You were saying that you originally got interested in magic around 5, and you were doing it a little bit then, and then recently got into it in the past 6 or 7 years, right?
yeah.
So what kind of things? What happened in the interim? What was going on there?
Okay, so I have a sister who's 7 years older than me. So a lot of kids go through a magic phase, and it often hits around 11 or 12.
Okay.
So my sister was doing magic stuff with a friend when I was 5, and that was my first. This is pretty cool. Like I'm seeing this happening. They used to do like magic tricks on my birthday party, that kind of thing, and I'd be like, this is pretty awesome. I got seriously. Well, I say seriously. I got as seriously into it as I could at the age of maybe, I want to say 8. I remember getting a lot of books out of the library. This is when I was in Australia. And one of those books in particular, I was enthralled by because it was just page after page. It was very old stuff. Like the illustrations all look like they were from the 1920s. And I'm looking at all these stage illusions and cutaways showing how it was done and everything. And it was all very old stuff, very out of date stuff. But again, it made a huge impression on me at the age of like 8 or 9, to the point where a couple of years ago I found that book. I actually found that it showed up in a blind auction at a magic convention, and I bid on it, but I didn't get it, so I was bummed. But then I found out somebody is selling a PDF version of it. So I have it. I have the PDF version. And I'm looking through it. I'm like, I remember all this from 40 plus years ago. And it's amazing. This straight nostalgia shot, like right to the brain stem. But yeah, so I was like 8 or 9 and learning about the stuff, getting the books out and trying things. And every kid gets a magic set, and you mess with that and stuff like that. When I got back to America when I was about 10, so 5th grade, 6th grade, that continued. And so I lived in Chicago, a big magic city, a lot of magic happening in Chicago. But of course, I was a kid and didn't have access to most of it. But I used to ride my bike to Magic Incorporated, which looks like this little mom and pop corner shop. But that itself was an illusion, because it was actually the whole block almost. Like the whole building was Magic Incorporated. They were like the 2nd or 3rd largest magic distributor in the world.
That's amazing.
But the shop itself was this tiny little corner shop. And everybody knew, Jay Marshall, Francis Marshall, his wife. Jay Marshall was a famous magician back in the day, but if you were a random kid walking in, you wouldn't know that. But one thing that would tip you off is they had a catalog that was 7 volumes in size.
Oh boy.
So I would subscribe to this catalog, and I would just, we had no money. So I would spend all my evenings just paging through the catalog and basically making annotated lists with prices and totals and everything of like, this is what I would get if I had money. And it would be like all this stuff that I wanted. And, it was just an obsession. Really great stuff.
Wow.
But, in the meantime, I was trying to teach myself magic, half from kids' books, but half from, I would get like a book at a magic store that was for magicians. And I'm trying to work through like, stuff that would never work with hands as small as mine were. And so you get discouraged and so on. And then at some point I also had a tarot reading that said I would never be a magician. And I was crying my eyes out for days over that.
Really?
It just like shut me down. But I still like kind of kept up with cards and things like that all through high school. A friend of mine who is a really talented cartoonist, he did an alternative yearbook for the weirdos.
An alternative yearbook,
where it was he had cartoon versions of all of our friends, and it was a whole separate thing. But in my actual yearbook, he signed it with a caricature of me, and it was labeled, the Jack Miller Card Force, and it was a caricature of me holding a deck of cards and a baseball bat saying like pick any card, I dares ya, you know. So like even in high school, I'd forgotten about that. My dad sent me my yearbook and he's like, remember this? I'm like, yeah, not really. So apparently it was still a thing. Even in high school, I was doing, I was known enough for doing magic where, that would show up in something like that. And then in college, I didn't have time for anything. If you don't have time to sleep, you don't have time to do a lot of magic. But it was always on my mind, and that was late 80s, early 90s. Penn and Teller were just starting to be a thing. Penn and Teller played Boston. I got tickets and went, and I got to hang out and talk with them a little while because they weren't so big where they weren't hanging out in the lobby.
Interesting.
And, again, so it was always part of my life throughout. But again, about 7 years ago, and I got to credit the internet again. I saw a video on YouTube that had gone viral, and it was a magic trick. And I remember thinking, I would love to be able to do that magic trick. And then I realized, I think maybe now I could. I've got hands big enough to actually do these things. And it was a good trick as an introduction back into magic for me, because it was like, if I want to do that trick, I got to learn a lot. There are a lot of things I need to be able to do competently to get through this whole routine. And so I just started buying cards, learning stuff, buying books, buying videos. And, it was that first love that never really went away, but finally I got to really spend time with it.
Yeah.
And, and then, pandemic happened.
And
is
that how
like
Twitch
everything
came
else,
about?
like, I guess now I'm sitting at home and just trying the stuff on my own. And I got desperate. And so I said, well, I'm going to see how much of this can be done over Zoom. And the answer was not a lot, but I was working on it and was trying to build more stuff that would work over Zoom. And I would hang out with my dad on Zoom and be like, can I try this with you? He was great. He's always been great. He's always been super supportive of anything I do. Wow. He's in my chat every time I stream.
That's true. I always see him in there.
He's always in there. Yeah, Info's dad. He's always in there. And he's going to be 80 next month. And
shout out to Info's dad. Hits. You're awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, he is awesome. He is awesome. We try to talk on the phone all the time, basically, whenever we can. And those conversations are like 3 hours long sometimes. It is just, we've always kind of clicked on that level, which is nice. But yeah, he's super supportive of anything I've ever wanted to do, whether it be poetry, whether it be magic, whether it be baking, literally all of the random things I've done throughout my life. He's always been, yeah, go for it. Do that thing. I don't know. I don't understand what you're doing, but let's do it. It sounds great. I wish everybody had parents like that.
That's amazing. Speaking of parents and baking, and you had mentioned you and your daughter baking. That's actually one of the things, as we've talked about this. You've talked a little bit about it on Twitch, and it was one of the reasons why I even wanted to talk to you in the first place was because you had mentioned that you saved up, like, again, this podcast is essentially about beauty, like the beauty of art and the beauty of whatever, battle, struggles, that kind of thing, business. And so I think this sort of ties everything together in a way, because you were able to purposefully take some time off from working.
Oh yeah.
And be able to, like, so that you could be home, raise your daughter, and obviously make, of course, eventually this was leading to the cookie pie cake extravaganza.
No, pie cakey. The pie cakey.
Yeah. There it is. Sorry,
it's the turducken of baking.
It's the turducken of baking.
Turducken, right? So
I've heard. Yeah,
I've inside of a duck inside
super
of a
gross.
Yeah, it's super gross. I was just talking to magicians on Zoom last night. We meet up like most Wednesdays because, again, when the pandemic happened, none of these magicians had anywhere to perform anymore. So it was basically 50 people getting into a Zoom room and complaining about, life.
Really?
And we still meet every week, which is great. But that actually came up. I don't remember exactly how. I did a trick. I showed a clip from my stream, which was one of the first tricks I ever created myself starting 7 years ago, which was a card to muffin. Because I was reading a book by one of my favorite magicians, and it was about creating your own magic. And it said, the first thing you need to do is what is it about you that's different from other people in magic? Like what can you do that maybe other magicians can't do? I'm like, well, I bake well and I bake a lot. let's try it. Let's see if we can do a trick with a card going into a muffin. And so I did that.
Awesome.
And I just performed it last Saturday on stream. I don't do it often because you need to bake to do it. You need the muffins. But last night somebody was like, oh yeah, I do a similar trick, but the card ends up in a chicken. And I was like, okay, now you need to do it with a turducken. You need to vanish the card. It's in the chicken. And then I said, okay, better yet, it's inside the egg, inside the chicken, inside the duck, inside the turkey, But I'm sorry, I completely hijacked that. But
No,
you
that's
were
all
talking
right.
about
I'm happy to hear about the
taking
trick.
time off to raise a kid.
But see, this is why you got to follow the stream. This is why people have to follow the stream, because there's always something. There's always something. So, but yeah, no, I was
again. It's not going to be a magic show, folks. I don't plan out. I mean, I'll be like, I think I'm going to do this. I might try to do this and so on, but there's no order to it. It's not a planned out thing because it's Twitch. Like Twitch is intended. Well, I don't know if it was intended, but it certainly is grown to be. It's a conversational medium. It's not. You don't usually, even if it's a musician's stream, it's not a show. It's not usually not like, here's our set list and we're going to do this, right? People are saying, hey, can you do this? And they're like, oh yeah, maybe we might be able to work, let's try it. It's very open. It allows a conversation between the audience and the performer. And that's what I love about it, because I just like hanging out and talking to people without actually being in a room with them, which is fantastic because I like to say I hate people. I mean, I don't really hate people, but I kind of hate being around people. So it's fantastic being able to talk to you. But if you were here, I might start getting a little antsy. That's all I'm saying. Nothing against you personally. No, but I'm just that way.
That's really great to hear, and I actually feel like a lot of people who have that. Like I'm going to tell you, I definitely have some introverted leanings. Like I look, not that I can't be in a group of people, not at all. I can do public speaking. I could do any of that kind of stuff. However, I do find it draining and nerve-wracking to be in a room with other people face to face for a long period of time. Even if friends come over sometimes, like I know these people and they're friends of mine. I'm tired of it after about a day, so
I'm right there with you. Exactly. Yeah. And when I get dragged to a party in real life, it is days to recover after that. And I think there is a very observable reason why somehow, but I mean, it sounds obvious now that we're talking about this. If I'm dragged to a party, somehow by the end of the night, I usually find myself in the middle of a conversation being the guy who's defending cannibalism. It just keeps happening over and over again. Like over the years, like every other party I'm at, somehow the conversation winds up with me defending cannibalism.
Now here's the thing.
It just
we just had this conversation on your Twitch stream that just happened today. So this is not a joke.
No, that's why I'm thinking about it. Because
we were talking about this.
Yeah, this is just what happens, because I'm the guy at the party who is either, if there are cats, great, I'm hanging out with the cats or the dog, like those are my people, right? If not, there better be a bookshelf because I'm staring at the titles on those bookshelf and reading them all slowly over and over again, top to bottom, left to right, top to bottom. Wow. Anything that will prevent people from coming over and trying to talk to me. And I can talk to people. I can be good at it. I mean, I was in customer service for years and I was good at it. I mean, I can, it's not even really faking it. It's just that it's really hard. But just because it's hard doesn't mean I'm not good at it. So I don't know.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and it's a weird thing. A lot of people have that too, though. And honestly, I relate to that quite a bit. I do find it is difficult. It's not that you can't do it, and it's not that you're shy or anything like that, or any of that. That's not really what's going on there. It's that it's draining. You don't get energy necessarily from that. You lose energy from it. I wonder why that is. Yeah. Would you feel like it's because you're very observant? You notice a lot of details. You hear the mistakes in what people are saying or thinking really easily, or are you critical in that regard, or do you feel like that maybe could be a thing?
That's probably part of it. I mean, I'm both the most and least observant person you're ever going to meet. I'm literally the person who this actually happened. I was driving home from work, the same route I had been taking for 10 years. But I happened to, I was on that route, but I wasn't driving home from work. It was the same route. And I had somebody in the car with me, and I was like, when did that open? And they're like, 25 years ago. I've been driving past it twice a day, 5 days a week for 10 years. Don't even see it because I'm driving a car. If I'm driving a car, I'm like focused on not dying. Also, I'm in Boston. I mean, if you're not focused on the road, you're going to die. It's not a good place to drive. But so I'll miss the big things all the time, but I'll notice little things, and they sometimes they'll get on my nerves. And not to my credit, internally, I think I'm probably way more critical than I should be of other people.
Yeah.
But I recognize that is a character failing on my part, and I'm working on it. We're all a work in progress until we're dead. And I'm just hoping that I'm better than dead right before I'm dead.
Yeah.
I would like the net positive rating, I don't want to die and they're like, well, that's better.
This is a better move.
I want somebody to be like, it was actually a little better when he was alive, that kind of thing. But
that feels kind of like an astronaut's way of doing things. Like I heard it was Chris Hetfield, who was the commander of the International Space Station for a while. He said that when you're going to the space station, what you should be, if you want to be a +1, like being a benefit to people there, you're going to have to aim for trying to be essentially not a -1. Like if you can be a 0, then you'll probably end up being a +1, because trying to be a +1, you'll probably get in a lot of people's way, and it's going to screw everything up.
Really good.
You're going to be a problem.
That's a good way of thinking about it. I'm going to have to, I'm going to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I thought about that, but no, I'm with you on that. I could see. We all are working on things. It's difficult not to be critical of others, and I think that is actually a thing that happens a lot, particularly in our age that we have, where you can essentially watch a video of anyone, even live, like we do, and you can criticize easily. You can watch a compilation of people failing, literally fail compilations, and say, look how stupid everybody is in the world. So then maybe that carries on or whatever. So, look, I'm not going to tell you that I don't do the same thing. Maybe I would like to work on that, less judgmental of people. So maybe I'm going to take that away from this one. But I think what I asked you was, how did you plan? Because I actually was really excited about this too. I'm going to ask you again.
Thing, right?
The fatherhood thing.
Okay, yeah. See, I somehow I remember the reference. I managed to get back. Back to it.
No, well, it doesn't matter. We take the long way around here. That's what Ragged World is. I didn't call it the pristine world. I call it the Ragged World.
Fair.
There's a strong reason for that. So.
I say always. Certainly, as far back as high school, I wanted to be a parent. I wanted to be a dad.
Really, that far back?
Kids.
A lot of times people are scared at that time, like when you're in high school, of having kids. So you were thinking, that's what I want to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And I don't know why that is. I'm sure there are people who would attribute that to like, oh, your parents are divorced. Or, you didn't get to see your mom much because she was working 80 hours a week and things, certainly these could all have fed into it. I don't know. All I know is that, I was pretty sure that one of the things I wanted to be was a dad. To the point where I would even like start thinking about names and things, although I went in a very different direction on that. I eventually came around to the decision that it's a bad idea to name your kids before you meet them. And in fact, we didn't name our kid until we spent a day with this tiny little wrinkled thing. And we were like, oh, okay. Looks like an Anya. Perfect. kind of thing.
Wow.
So, because people would be like, oh, what names do you have? And I was like, we're not doing that. Cause I'm sure you've met people where you're like, you are definitely not a Christine, and they're like, yeah, I know I'm not a Christine. I hate my name. And I feel like everybody should get to choose their own name eventually, but the next best thing is at least meet meet your kid before you choose a name for your kid. Like, maybe that will be slightly better. But then also, I feel like everybody, if you wound up with the wrong name, everybody gets to choose their own name.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I feel like that should be an inalienable right. Everybody should get to choose what people call you. So
true. I agree with you on that. It's true, because at some point you might grow out of a name that you had when you were an infant as well. So that makes sense. No, it's very interesting. It's a small detail in a way. Like you're saying, okay, you're meeting an infant, but I guess I wouldn't know that because I don't have kids. So I guess there is a pretty big difference from before they're born to after they're born. Once they're in the room, you felt like you had a better grasp of giving a name at that point?
A little bit. Yeah. I mean, you get a little bit beforehand because, even in the ultrasound, you get a sense of what your kid's going to look like.
Oh.
And you get a sense of personality based on what they do while they're, gestating, because certain kinds of music, they start kicking more, or you're watching one particular TV show and they're moving around all the time. And it's like, this is interesting, little things like that. You start getting a sense of a personality before they're even born. But once they're out, it's like, all right, this is a tiny red screaming creature who really didn't want to be pulled out. Like in this particular case, I'm like, okay, this person just did not want to be out. Yeah, and what a shock, wound up being introverted, right? So it's like you can kind of pick up on it even early, and maybe it's a coincidence, but maybe not. But I got the sense right away. I'm like, I know where this kid's coming from. Like I'm right there with you, kid. I'm sorry. I know it's bright. You're cold. They've got you on a metal scale. I mean, I would hate this too. I'm sure I did. So, but you do get, even in a day or two, I definitely got a bigger sense of who this person was than beforehand.
That's so cool.
And when you pre-choose a name, I feel like, not always, but it could be a symptom of maybe you're going to be that kind of parent that's trying to make your kid into something specific. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes you can make as a parent. The important thing is, and I always try to tell people this if they want to hear it. I never give unsolicited advice, but if people ask me, they're going to be a parent, they're like, what can you tell me about it? I'm like, are you sure you want me to tell you? Okay. The most important thing to me is, you need to remember that is not you. That is a different person. That person could turn out to be somebody you hate, or at least somebody that if they weren't your kid, if you met them on the street, you would never get along with that person. That might be what happens. You need to be okay with that because your job is not to turn them into you. Your job is to keep them safe and let them discover who they are themselves. Yeah. Give them chances to try different things. Let them decide what they want to do and who they want to be, and that shouldn't be you. Like, yeah, you can guide them. You don't want them to grow up to be a serial killer or a magician, but you can,
AKA a very good serial killer.
Exactly. So, you can sort of guide things, but I always felt it was, and that comes from my dad. Like, he never said that explicitly, but just the way he behaved my whole life. Whenever I got into something new, he would be smiling about it. He didn't know what it was, or he didn't have any interest in it, but he liked that I was interested in something and passionate about something. Like I was that dorky kid in high school who suddenly found the romantic poets of the early 19th century, Byron, Keats, Shelley, all those people. And I was into that. And, I've still got the books he bought me with the inscriptions in them.
Amazing.
From the early, the mid to late 80s, he's got the inscription in there. It's like, hope you enjoy this. That was the kind of parent I wanted to be. Just like, whatever you're into,
fantastic.
I want to be excited for you. I want you to find who you are. And because so many people don't find out who they are until, well, some people never do. And you can spot those people, right? Because they're always miserable and angry because they never had a shot. They never had a shot to find out who they were. And in some sense, it's almost a luxury, but it shouldn't be. We live in a world where it shouldn't be a luxury to be who you want to be. So
And get a chance to figure it out. That's something. And honestly, a lot of the things you said are incredible to me too. Like think about, a dad getting you poetry books. I think a lot of people would find that surprising in a way. Like sometimes, like just
maybe,
there are a lot of cliches that are out there, but sometimes they're cliches because it happens. It's like, hey, here's a football, like forget that poetry,
right.
here, do something else. And it's like, well, no, here's what you like. Okay, cool. I can handle that. I think it does take some mental fortitude and a little bit of the ability to detach from that idea that you have to be this person who's helicoptering over their personality or their character, besides the serial killer part like you mentioned. But
Besides the serial killer part, I mean, you can draw the line at
Fantastic.
serial killer. I feel like that's a reasonable line to draw.
Reasonable, yeah.
But generally speaking, I feel like a lot of people are not living the way that they would be happiest to live for no reason other than people told them not to, either explicitly or implicitly.
Wow.
And like, if you want to go back a couple hundred years in our society and, okay, everybody had to work just to survive, sure. But we have progressed to a point where people have leisure time. Most people, I say most, I mean, that's a very privileged thing to say, but I was going to say most people don't have to worry about necessarily starving to death or dying of disease. But of course, that's not true. Well, plenty of people do,
Sure, yeah.
even in this society, and it's a shame because we have the
better.
resources to make that not be a case.
Hmm.
But
it's better than it was by a pretty huge margin, I guess, is what you're saying.
Yeah. I think it's fair to say that. So I think it's fair to say we are at a point, at least in this society, where I consider it kind of criminal that people are not allowed to be who they want to be. And I'll give you an example.
Sure.
So I still say my daughter. They use they are agender, so they use they them pronouns, but specifically told me, you can take the title Daughterator, you can pry it from my cold dead fingers. I'm not giving that up.
Okay.
Because that was the whole thing. They're my daughter, they're my moderator, they're my Daughterator. So
amazing.
I feel like I can still say daughter, but I try to be really careful about the they them thing. So one of their school friends from grade school up, I mean, I told you I volunteered in kindergarten classrooms. I remember this friend from kindergarten. So I've been there this whole time. That friend came out as trans recently, and that family did exactly all the wrong things, to the point where, I first heard about this when my daughter calls me and said, this is a big ask, but is there any chance over the summer, my friend who has more or less been disowned, and has no place to stay once the semester ends, can she stay in my room, because my daughter was staying at their mom's place for the summer, so vacant room. And I was like, yeah. And again, I don't like being around other people, generally speaking, but that is not an okay situation to tell your kid, who has just bravely come out and said, I've known since I was 12, I'm actually female. And basically, all the wrong reactions. And then, this woman basically felt like she had no place at the house, no place to go.
Yeah,
and it's only a couple blocks away, So I was like, you know what? Yeah, come on over. Let's just do this thing, And I haven't kept up exactly on what the situation is, but
It's funny though, the thing that came to my mind there, it reminds me of something that I learned from a Navy SEAL platoon commander, believe it or not,
Awesome.
where they were talking about, because I think a lot of this stuff sort of crosses over, because you're talking about being a parent, it means you're a leader in some regards. So I feel like
Yeah.
it crosses over here, where they said that, okay, let's say you have the in the chain of command, you have someone above you who's telling you, okay, you guys are going to have to go take that hill, and look, there's a pillbox there. They got a fortified position. They got the high ground, and there's only so many of us, and we're probably all going to get killed doing that. But he's sending you there. That's what he's saying you got to do. Is it good for you to? What do you do here? Is it good for you to say, no, I'm not going to do it, or just say, yes, sir, we're going to go and try it, and all of you get killed? Or do you say, no, I'm not doing it? Then he's like, okay, cool, you're out. And then he gets a yes man in there, and all your guys get taken in and get killed too. So I feel like it's that situation a little bit there, where you may not like what you're being told. You may not like what you're being told here. And this situation isn't the situation you were hoping for. But to say, okay, you've got nowhere to go, like hit the bricks, kid, probably, is that going to get you the circumstances you really wanted? So I'm kind of thinking of that,
And I think that's been one of those lessons that's been kind of hardest for me to internalize over the decades.
Oh, really?
I made it to half a century. So, I'm proud that I'm not dead yet.
And you're looking great.
Yay me. I did it, But I try. It's really easy to give lip service to the whole I accept what other people want to do and what they're doing. It's way harder to internalize that and not be judgmental. And I'm definitely a judgmental person. I guarantee, I'm probably going to be among the more judgmental people you meet. The most important thing is that, you work on trying to change that inside, but if you can at the very least muzzle the exterior consequences of that, that's a good start. At least don't screw things up for other people just because you're messed up inside,
Fair enough.
And my girlfriend has actually been really important for me in that way, not necessarily trying, but just because we're very different people. Like, I think anybody who knows both of us, or who knew both of us before we got together, probably were like, what? Like, how did that happen? Because we're totally different people. And we've been together, 10 years.
Hey,
and it's been a struggle. It's been a trial. Sometimes it's really, really difficult. But that is an incredibly useful learning process as well. And it's helpful because I'm head over heels in love with her. I'm going to do anything I can to make that work. So I get this side benefit of, I have a really good reason to work on this, and that spills over into other things. Because we're totally different. We are totally different. And every, there's some overlap in terms of political and social leanings. We're pretty well aligned. Religious, very different. Culturally, taste in music, taste in movies, taste in TV shows, totally different. It's a struggle. We'll find something we both want to see, and it's like, okay, we're focusing on this. This is the show we're watching until we're done with it, and then we got to find another show. Like, what are we going to do? That kind of thing. I will live on horror movies. She will never watch a horror movie. Even something as basic as that. You've seen my stream. It's pretty important to me.
Yeah,
that's my
so many
aesthetic.
horror elements.
So it's tricky. We try to find ways of meeting each other in the middle, but to me that's so valuable because I can bring that across to other relationships with other people. And I'm lucky. I've been so lucky in so many ways, but I got very lucky to fall in love with someone who loves me back, despite the fact that we're super different people.
Oh, wow.
And it gives us something to work on. Like we both need to put a lot. Sometimes it's like sometimes you're like, love shouldn't be this hard, right? Like it really shouldn't be this hard. And I think it's true, maybe it shouldn't, but that doesn't mean that it can't be. And it doesn't mean
Mm.
that it means it's wrong and maybe you should find the easy thing. But like
I think maybe people
I'm
don't
still
like.
on,
Oh, I'm sorry.
like yeah, I was just going to say I'm still on really good terms with my daughter's mother.
Mm.
When we separated, we figured everything out as best we could. Like the most important thing is try to disrupt the kid's life as little as possible, and it was still one of the hardest things I ever did. You
Yeah.
know, still one of the things that haunts me is like my kids' reaction when we told them what was going to happen.
Oh man.
Um, is just gut wrenching. Like I still think about it like every other day. It's like, I hate that I did that to somebody,
But at the same
But
time, what could you have done differently?
well,
Really,
exactly, because the alternative was a lot of people make what I consider to be that mistake of, well, we'll just like stick it out until they leave for college or something like that, and it's just
yeah,
like, um,
could be the
my
wrong
ex had a really
example.
good point about that was if we do that, we're also just kind of giving the wrong idea of what a relationship should be, and like you don't necessarily want to mess up. So
That's a
I think we
tough.
made the right
That's a
decision, but
quandary.
it was sometimes you're in a situation where even the right decision is going to be bad and it's going to break some things.
It's the
And I still feel
Kobayashi
bad
Maru.
about that, but it was the right thing. It was the right thing to do. And, again, we're like, okay, here's all the things we need to make you understand. First of all, you don't have to move. You're not changing schools. You don't need to, say goodbye to any of your friends. Her mom literally moved into an apartment like 3 blocks away. And it's like, you're not going to lose your room. You're going to get a different room, another room at the other place. And, you can go to either place, we'll switch back and forth. And we
That is
made it
good.
work as best we could, but we stayed friends. And that was the other thing. It was like, we're ending this before we hate each other.
That's
And
great.
then the kid suffers because of that. So I mean, literally now it's just like, I'll get a text message, be like, hey, any chance, you can pick something up for me on the way home from work and drop it off. And it's like, yeah, sure, no problem. Like
That
it,
makes a lot
it's
of sense.
it's what it should be for what it is. But the reason I brought it up really was because uh, she and I were very alike in a lot of these ways that my current girlfriend and I are so different,
Mm.
and it didn't work out. So just because some of those things are easy doesn't mean that it should be. You know what I mean?
I think that could
It's
be a
it's like,
huge mistake as well that a lot of people seem to have as an idea is that you're supposed to be
yeah,
very similar or compatible if you want to, but I think the
yeah,
term compatible, you're not really sure all the time what actual compatibility is. You might be compatible because you are opposites. And
right,
although some of those basic day-to-day things are probably going to grind on you a little bit with an opposite,
yeah,
I don't feel like again there's an intangible quality to love and relationships that I don't think can be explained that easily.
yeah,
I don't know what that is. If that's biochemical or if that's something else, but
yeah,
it does seem to be the case. If you click, hey, you might have some of these issues because it is what it is. That might be what you need. And you again are an
right,
individual. You're not a copy and paste of somebody else. And so
right.
these common general guidelines maybe aren't going to fit. And the fact that it would seem like you two are so much alike, it's going to work so well. Well, who said you needed to be alike? And I think that
I
makes a lot
think
of
it
sense.
depends on your personality type. So you could get two people who are very much alike and they happen to be the kind of person where that's exactly what each other need and it's going to work out great. But you might have somebody who's going to be better off being challenged on the little things and isn't going to, like that's one of the problems I have with it's not really a problem I have with it, but I'm a little bit skeptical of like dating services and things where the idea is you fill out a personality profile and they find somebody that 97% same answers. For some people, that's perfect. For other
Mm,
people, that's the kiss of death, and they may not know that that's the kiss of death. So, and it's probably for most people that's probably a good thing that
yeah.
you are as close as possible in all these different ways because then there's fewer stumbling blocks and the idea is that we've paved the way as much as possible So there's fewer things you have to fight against in order to make the relationship work. I think that's a valid strategy,
Sure.
provided you understand that it's not going to work for everybody.
That's it.
So I would say, if you're the kind of person, it's like you keep getting matched with people that are the same interests as you, and everything seems to be working out, but nothing ever seems to fully gel. Could be, you just got to keep trying in the same thing, but it could also be maybe you're the kind of person that doesn't, is never going to be able to click with somebody who's that similar to yourself.
Exactly.
Your best bet might be if you have two perfect narcissists that are almost exactly like, perfect. You've got, that's a match made in heaven.
They'll understand each other well.
Right. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't mean that as a judgment call. If you're a narcissist, great, more power to you. Find somebody who is as much like you as possible, who also is a narcissist and wants to be with somebody who's as much like them as possible. Fantastic. That's a recipe for success. I think that would be great. But
it's like
and maybe that's most people. I don't even know.
It's like the story of Narcissus and the brook or lake that he used to look at himself into,
staring into the water
until he would finally drown, and then the forest nymphs, or was it the goddesses? I can't remember who came up. They're like asking, "Oh, do you the river? You must really miss Narcissus. He was so beautiful. You would know best because he spent so much time next to you." He was like, "Oh, was he? Did he look good?" I really just I loved seeing the reflection of myself in his eyes. So I guess the two narcissists
awesome.
would work well together.
Yep.
Anyway, yeah.
Okay, so the parenthood thing. Let's go all the way back.
Let's do it. Parenthood. So you said you wanted to be a dad. Well, this is fantastic, though.
I wanted
do
to
not
be a dad,
have to
but I
worry
wanted
about
to be
that.
a hands-on. Yeah, I didn't want to be an absent parent. And again, I had parents who were not around as much as they wanted to be. So it may well just easily boil down to that. That may be why it was. But I had specific ideas of why would I want to have a kid and then never see the kid? Like, what would be the point of me being at work all the time when there's this kid? I'm missing all of the young development, all the interesting stuff. So the plan was always, when we have a kid, my wife at the time would keep working and I would be the stay-at-home dad. And I was all over that. I loved that idea. And so I basically saved up as much as I could I was at that job out of college like 9 years plus, 9.5 years, something like that.
9.5 years of
and
saving.
saved up as much as I could. And my last day at that job was 2 days before the kid was born. And then that was it. I stayed home made it. The money ran out after about 5 years. And then I wasn't real. Like, I made it to the point where, okay, now they're going into kindergarten, but I didn't feel like they also weren't ready to go into kindergarten. Like, socially, it was like not a great situation.
Okay.
So I was like, if I can make this last longer and, stay home for a while longer, I will. And I kind of lucked into that was my career as a semi-professional vegan baker.
Like, that's where it goes off on a tangent again. Like, this is what I love about your stories.
There were
you were like, we were in the States, then we were in Australia, then then I was at this business.
Yeah, it's all over the place.
But when you were working,
were
may I ask what the job was? The job out of college?
It was kind of a lot of different things. It kept changing, which, for me is kind of ideal. I get bored if I do the same thing, over and over again.
Okay.
So basically, I graduated from a very good school with a very bad degree.
Oh, really?
But I had a split degree. It wasn't a double major. It was a split major because I couldn't hack a full computer science degree in 4 years. I wasn't going to make it. And I was panicking because, we had no money. I was just like, after this, it's over. It was amazing I was even at that school. I didn't even expect to go to any school because I'm not kidding, we had no money. I spent what money I had on college applications shooting for the moon, assuming I wouldn't be able to go anywhere. I just wanted to see if I could get in. Like, that was my college money, was I'm just going to spend it on applications because I'm not going anywhere.
Okay.
But it turns out I got in everywhere I applied. And
Whoa.
I was applying to places that had a lot of money, and they were like, well, we've determined that you have no money, but you could take out this much in loans and we'll just pay the rest. I was like, oh.
Interesting.
so so yeah, I'm not kidding. My cheapest college option would have been Harvard
Wow.
because
Well,
they had the
well
most money
done.
to give me. They had the most money to give me, and I still love this. I went to, I don't know how it's done. I kind of know how it's done now because, my kid was a few years ago. But certainly when I applied to colleges, there was no online application. You're filling out paper and you're sending it in. There's lines at the post office, to get it in by the postmark date. But you had to get recommendations from, teachers and counselors and stuff like that. And I went to the counselor in my school, my counselor, and said, I need a letter of recommendation for Harvard. And she lost it. She just like blew up. She's like, how am I going to write 15 letters of recommendation for Harvard? How am I going to tell Harvard that our school has 15 people who should all be going to Harvard? And I was like, whatever, lady, that's your problem. I'll be over here. Whatever you got to do, And then it turned out I was the only one who got in, and then I turned them down, and she hated me for it.
Oh no.
She hated me for that, and it was kind of
Wow.
amazing. It was kind
What
of
changed your
amazing.
mind?
I never really wanted to go there. I just wanted to see if I could get in.
And you can, apparently.
Yeah, I got in, but it wouldn't have been a good match for me. It wouldn't have been
Oh,
a good
okay.
match.
Okay. So you got out with a split degree, computer science and
Split degree,
something?
computer science and English literature.
Oh, amazing. Amazing.
Yeah,
What a combo.
my degree literally says Bachelor's of Science in Humanities and Engineering. That
That's
is
excellent
literally what
though.
is on the.
That
It,
gives you
it
both
makes
sides
you
of the coin, in my
unemployable, is what
opinion.
it does.
I
Yeah,
I,
it,
I
it
feel
just
like
people look at that and they're like, next, Except, so I sent out. It must have been like, I don't know, 50 applications, and nothing.
okay.
I think one of the applications went through a placement agency, which I didn't know, and they called and like, come in, we'll talk to you, and we'll see what we. And I went in, they interviewed me, and at the end of that, I was like, yeah, they're never calling me again, because the
Okay.
whole thing, they were just like, what, you know. So eventually, I got one call, and this is after months of nothing. I'm literally, the only reason I'm alive is because PBS was showing Bob Ross every day.
Oh,
Every day I get up, I watch Bob Ross, and I don't kill myself. And it's like, okay,
wow.
moving on. And so
Rest in
finally
peace,
I get
Bob
a call
Ross.
from this company, and I was like, oh, really? And they're like, do you want me to come in? They're like, we'd like you to come in for an interview. And I said, really, for the programming job? And they're like, oh no, we would never hire you for a programming job. And I was like, all right. So what then? And like, well, we just opened up this new thing it's basically an administrative position. But it would really help if you were somebody who, could write, understands people, and also understands technology, because it's like a tech company, and you're going to have to deal with a lot of people. You're going to need to understand. Like, if we put somebody in
Wow.
who's just good with people but doesn't know the tech, that's not going to work. So we thought you might be a good match. And I was like, yeah, I'll come in. Yeah, I don't care what it is. I mean, at this point, money is almost gone.
Wow.
So I went in, I completely aced that interview. Like, everything about that interview, I was like, really? That's what I've done that. I know how to do, like, it was just very lucky. And I got called back for a second interview with, basically the people who ran the company. And I aced that interview too. And I was like, this is amazing. And so they called me and said, we'd like to offer you the position. There's a catch, which is we're moving. So here's the thing.
Oh.
I didn't have a car. I didn't even have a valid license. I had an expired out-of-state license. I was only interviewing at places that were accessible by public transportation, including this place. But they're like, in 30 days, we're moving to this remote suburb, and you're going to have a car. And I was like, well, first I got to get a license. But I mean, sure. Like the amount they offered me, it wasn't a lot, but it was enough above what I figured out my bare minimum was, where I ran the numbers and I'm like, I think I can afford car payments on top of, I think this would work out.
Hmm.
But I was like, well, I'll get back to you. Like, I definitely want the job, but I'm going to have to find out what I need to do to get a license and then a car. It was a process.
Wow, that's a lot.
Well, it turns out in my state, it's incredibly easy. My adopted state, it's incredibly easy to get a license.
Okay.
I literally went to the registry of motor vehicles and got in line. I mean, there were no websites. There was no such thing. I got in line and I got to the front and they said, what do you need? And I said, I have an expired out-of-state driver's license. I need a valid in-state driver's license. What do I need to do? And they said, you need to give me $60 and then go right there and have your picture taken.
There
and I
it
said,
is.
that's amazing. So literally, I got the job offer on Friday night. Monday morning, I had a license.
Nice.
There was no test of any kind.
Fantastic.
No road test, no written test, no eye test even, nothing.
Wow.
They just took my picture and handed me a license. And to this day, 30 years later, more than 30 years later, I have never taken any test in this state for a license.
Well, let's keep
Every
that
time
quiet.
I go to renew it, they're like, just here you go. Here's your
There it
license.
is.
Pay us money, take your license, you're done. Which explains why nobody in this state can drive.
There it is.
It's super dangerous to drive here. But on the plus side, it was really easy for me to, So then I had to like buy a car without having a job, and I got a really terrible rate on an auto loan, and all this stuff. My first paycheck showed up the day before rent was due, and we were completely out of money.
Wow.
Like nothing left. Paycheck showed up. Yeah, it was perfect timing. Like we used everything we had to get that car so that I could get the one job offer, the one job that was offered to me, and then it all worked out. And then I was able to make my student loan payments and paid them off in 10 years, and and it just kept going from there.
That's great.
But yeah, so I started out doing basically coordinating the 4-month to 6-month long installation process of a cancer treatment system, a computer-based cancer treatment system for brain cancer that used focused radiation and 3D modeling back when you couldn't do it on a phone, back when you needed an $80,000 workstation that was the size of a small refrigerator.
Wow.
To do real-time 3D planning. That's what we sold. So the system cost $250,000.
That's incredible.
And so a hospital would basically say, we want this system. The salespeople would get a huge, check.
Like a
and
commission. Yeah.
Then it was up to me to call the hospital and say, okay, here's everything we need to do to get the system installed at your place. And then I would send engineers over. They'd have to take scans off their medical scanners, the CAT scanners, the MRI scanners, send them into us. We'd have to write software that would be able to translate that into our software. And, it was a whole thing. They had to take measurements by scanning a device so that we could prove to the FDA that we were within, sub-millimeter. Yeah, because you don't want to irradiate the wrong thing in the brain. All that fun stuff.
There's a lot of
so that was basically my job.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was basically my job. Is like a hospital paid us money for this thing, which was many things actually. It was a bunch of medical equipment, a bunch of computer equipment, custom software, all that stuff. A lot of moving parts and a lot of places where that process can break down. And they said, we need to hire somebody who can just stay on top of these 40 hospitals, all of whom who have different equipment. So that was my job for the first few years. And then I got sick of that. Mostly because the salespeople kept selling the system to hospitals who didn't own the equipment to actually use it. And then I had to deal with all that fallout. And then, they'd send me scans from a machine that we had no software that could work with it. And they're like, well, we paid you $250,000, make it work. And, I just like too much stress. It sucked, hated it. And actually wound up randomly hearing on the radio an ad for the local arts newspaper.
Okay.
Which I was a fan of. And they needed basically an IT person who dealt with Macintosh stuff, which is me. I deal with all Mac stuff, and so I, applied there and interviewed, and they offered me the job. And I told the medical company I was working for, that I was leaving. And they basically said, "What can we do so that you do not leave?" I was like, "Well, first of all, I can't be doing the same job because it's killing me." And they're like, "We will find something else for you to do. We don't want you to go."
Oh, there you
And
go.
I was like, "All right, well, that's pretty cool." And so they gave me this big raise, and they let me work on different things, and so I ended up turning down the arts newspaper job, which turned out to be a good thing because that paper folded
Well, yeah, there you go.
eventually. But also, the main reason I didn't take it, honestly, was because it was the arts newspaper. I mean, this was the newspaper where I would read this every week, and this was the first week I was in Boston, I think. The copy of this was in the lounge of my dorm hall, and I'm like, "This is really cool. This is like the Chicago Reader, but Boston." It was the Boston Phoenix. And they're like, "Here's all the concert listings." I'm like, "Public Image Limited is playing at the Orpheum tonight." I go to the RA. I was like, "Chris, how hard is it to get to the Orpheum on public transportation?" And he's like, "It is incredibly easy to get to the Orpheum on public transportation." And so I just went. I was like, "Okay, tell me how to get there." And I went, and I just found a scalper and paid money, and I got tickets. And that was my first concert in Boston. And It was amazing. It was Public Image Limited and Flush for Lulu, who I didn't know at the time, but I'm still a fan of them, even though they're long gone.
Okay.
But so like, to me, the Boston Phoenix was Boston. Like, as soon as I got to Boston, I was like all about the Boston Phoenix. And I went and interviewed there, and it was really corporate. I was expecting it to be super laid back. And they're introducing me to all the writers, and I know all these writers' names from the paper and everything. But they're all like dressed for the office, and they're working on outdated equipment. And it seemed like management wasn't really super nice to the talent. And then the final straw for me was, they said I couldn't wear skate shoes to the office.
At the art paper?
Yeah, at the arts newspaper. They're like, you have to wear like regular shoes, like leather, regular office type shoes. You can't wear sneakers. And so I was like, this is probably not where I want to be then. I mean, I literally still wear skate shoes every day, even though I haven't set foot on a board in years. It's just like it's just a thing. My board is still in my car. It's there whenever I need it. Every once in a while I do need it, and it's like, why did I stop doing this? This is so great. I love this. But the main reason I stopped doing it is because you can't raise a baby with a broken wrist.
Yeah,
at least not easily.
Keeping yourself
so
from injuries,
a lot of the skateboarding dropped down. I mean, we still got video of when my daughter was not even 2. There's some camcorder footage of me popping kick flips at the tennis courts while they were playing in the sand kind of thing. And but eventually I was like, I need to be a lot more careful about things, because somebody's relying on me, and I can't. Because I've broken enough bones over the years where like I know what happens when you break a bone. You can't do the same things.
For a while.
I broke this hand.
Oh boy.
And I got really good at typing with my left hand when I broke this hand. And then my kid, as a baby, refused to sleep unless they were being held. So I got really good at having a sleeping baby here and typing one-handed with this hand. And it turns out this is really helpful. If you can type one-handed with either hand, that's a really useful skill, and I use it all the time, certainly for Twitch, because I'm just like,
absolutely.
But I have no idea what we were talking about.
Yeah, no, I know. It's okay. No, that's kind of how that goes, though. Like, it's
fine, right?
No, it's totally fine. Actually, that's kind of the point. We were meant to go in a lot of different directions. I feel like there's so much there that I appreciate, because it's not one-sided. The story is not one-sided. Like you're saying, even with your school, your degree was not one-sided. You know, it's like, okay, I really am
Yeah.
into English literature. I'm really into this. We don't necessarily have to be fitting into this particular box, because the job you got
No.
actually worked really well for that. And then, although it
Yeah.
was difficult, I'm interested. There's a million questions I could ask you. I know we've been sitting here for a little while though, so I don't think I'll keep
That's all
bugging
good.
you.
Yeah.
But
I got nowhere to be for another 2 hours.
oh, okay, well,
I'm not going to keep you on here for 2 hours, but just so you know, I don't have to jet off anywhere. So
no, me neither. You know, I always clear the schedule when there's a podcast, because I don't want to rush the person who I'm talking to, especially if there's so many. It's tough to tell all your stories, you know, quickly, especially since
Yeah.
there's so much nuance to them. But yeah, and then just the logistics of all of these things is interesting. How you put the business side of it together, which is, even if you're not running your own business, or you're working in a business, I do feel like finance is kind of your personal business in a sense. Like, as a
Yeah.
person, we are handling finance in some way or another. And you seem to find your ways through that. And like, I think where we were at was that you had decided you were, you wanted to raise your child, be at home. That was the plan. But
Yeah.
by the time the money had run out, you were feeling like, oh, this is still, I would still like to continue this. And you switched over to vegan baking and became a semi-professional vegan baker, which is a whole nother story. And I guess a thing that you were able to do at
Yeah.
home. How did that end up being?
Yeah, well, the reason it's semi-professional was because I got paid for it, just not legally. And I tried to do it legally. I did all the research of what I would need to do, because the reason this even happened was because I'm a good baker, and I happen to be vegan, and I was good at making vegan cakes, pies, cookies, anything but brownies. For some reason, brownies was like my Achilles heel. I could never make decent vegan brownies. Now I make amazing ones. Like, it just took me forever to find a recipe that really worked for me. But pretty much all of my friends were musicians, kind of still are, which is weird because I'm not a musician. But so there'd be a lot of after parties. I knew a lot of people in bands. There'd be after parties, and I would bake things and bring them. And
That's so
so
cool.
I kind of got known as the guy who makes these amazing cakes and brownies and things like that. And at some point, that kind of bled over into some of the local vegan restaurants found out that I was a vegan baker, and they were literally bringing stuff in across state lines. They were like driving to New Hampshire to a vegan bakery in New Hampshire, buying cakes, driving all the way back, and then selling slices in the restaurant. And they're like, we hate doing that. Can we just pay you to make cakes for us? And I was like, yeah, I guess. Let me find out what I need to do that legally. And it turns out the only way to do it legally was to go broke doing it, because you needed so many different licenses. I would have had to get my personal kitchen
Like up to code.
qualified as a commercial kitchen. Like, I would have literally had to bring the state in to say this is now a commercial kitchen. Like, I would have had to replace like, there was no way to do it legally. And I was looking for all kinds of loopholes, because they're like, we have all these exceptions. You can totally sell homemade baked goods if you're a church. And I was like, well, that doesn't seem, I mean, like, if your concern is public safety and health,
And how does that
why
factor?
does that make a difference? And obviously that's not really what they're concerned about. So eventually, it was like, okay, just don't, if anyone asks, I bake these here. If anyone asks, I'm baking these in your kitchen, and they're like, yeah, we got it. It's cool. So there were a couple of restaurants that did this. There was a local vegan Thai restaurant,
Oh,
which had 2 locations. One is still open in Chinatown here. And actually, funny story, a couple of years ago, after not having gone there, I went in there. The reason that I stopped baking for the one that I had been baking for was I went and dropped off some cakes one day, and I'm like, I know I still owe you one more cake. It's not done yet. I'll bring it tomorrow. And they're like, okay, that's cool. I came by the next day with the cake, and the restaurant was shut down.
oh wow.
And not just closed, all the furniture was out on the curb.
Whoa. Nobody said
And I
anything
was
to you?
like,
You just kind of
yes,
just
I
showed
have
up
a
and they were
cake
gone.
now. Yeah. And they owed me like several $100s. And they just like gone in the night. I was like,
That's
well,
why they
okay, I
didn't
learned
say
my lesson
anything.
there. But many years later, I'm entertaining people in town, and we happened to be near Chinatown, and I was like, well, this vegan Thai restaurant that is the sister of the one that I used to bake for is still there, still open. Let's go get lunch. And we went there, and we're eating there, and the owner comes over to me, and he's like, I can't believe it's you. This is like easily 15 years later. He's like, I can't believe it's you. I owe you money. Here's a check.
Wow.
And I was like,
All right.
okay. He's like, yeah, when the place shut down suddenly, I didn't have your number and nobody had your number. And I was asking the Vegetarian Society and they gave me a number. And I was like, well, they wouldn't know me because I don't know any of them. So they apparently thought I was someone else and they gave him the wrong number. But he was like, I'm so happy that you're here. Here's a check of the money I owe you. I'm like, that's awesome. And he's like, I don't suppose you're still baking. I'm like, no, no. I'm not doing that anymore because I was literally baking 14 hours a day.
That's a lot.
Yeah, every day, not
Baking
5
is
days a
serious.
week.
Cakes, particularly.
14 hours a day, every day, just to make enough to stay home for another couple of years. And it was not easy.
Wow.
If you want to make money at baking, you either have to cut a lot of corners, which I wasn't willing to do. Like I could have made it work by making cakes that weren't as good, but the whole point for me was making good stuff. So, but fundamentally, also people aren't going to pay $60 for a birthday cake.
Yeah.
But I was using ingredients that were expensive and good, and I was making one thing at a time. I wasn't making like 50 cakes and freezing them and then thawing them as the orders came in. I was like, I'm never freezing anything. Everything's made fresh from scratch to be delivered on the day you specify. That was my thing. That was what I wanted to do.
Highest possible quality.
Yeah, it just means that you're not gonna. I mean, I was always more about, back in the 90s, 97, I had a website that kind of took off, and I was internet famous before there was such a thing as internet famous.
Oh wow!
I think I had something like 30,000 viewers a day.
All right.
At its height, and people wanted merchandise, and so I was like, I'm going to make T-shirts, but they're going to be really good T-shirts. They're not going to be crappy merch T-shirts that they give you at trade shows. And so I did my research, and I found this amazing place in Rhode Island, like 45 minutes away, and I was like, here's the design. It's photorealistic. It was a 3D rendering I did myself of the logo. And it had like specularity. It was like made of glass, so you could see things through it, and the light diffracted around it and everything. I was like, I want this reproduced on a T-shirt as best as possible. What do you recommend? Because I heard you're the best at this. And they said, well, it's basically a 2-color design. It's basically red and shades of white, gray to black. So we could get away with doing 2-color inks, and just half toning it all the way down. I'm going to recommend we use 12 inks.
Nice.
Different shades of red and pink and different shades of white and gray, all the way down to black, to make this look as good as you want it to look. And I said, let's do that. And they use like the best quality T-shirts, and they're doing this ridiculous thing. So I still have a basement full of them because this wasn't like a print on demand thing. This was, all right, order a bunch, stuff them in the car, drive them back home, keep them in your basement, and hopefully people buy them. And then the website lasted until like 2003, and I just couldn't keep it up anymore. It's still up now, actually.
Really?
It's in reruns. So
Okay.
I put it back up because people kept emailing me about it. So now you can go there and see what was posted, because it updated daily. So now it's like, here's what was posted literally 25 years ago.
Wow.
And it just, so you see what was happening every day 25 years ago.
This is kind of cool.
But yeah, even with the T-shirts, I was like, I want the T-shirts, I want the stickers to be as good as possible. So for some things, I really insist on quality, and for other things, it's just like, I don't care.
May I ask, what was this show? What was this site? Like, what were you doing?
This was, it's kind of a long story. It wouldn't make sense to most people these days, I feel.
Oh, okay.
Let me give you some historical context.
Okay.
In 1997, I broke my ankle skateboarding.
Okay.
And so I was laid up. Not laid up. I was still going to work, but when I was at home, I was basically sitting down with my leg elevated. And so I had a lot more time to work on starting a consulting and like a computer consulting business,
Okay.
which was called InfoZar Productions. That's where the name comes from. 1997, I registered the domain name. And at the time, I was really enamored of this one particular game that had a very stark, like Russian military propaganda sort of look and feel. And so I had a logo that I designed that was like an eyeball, basically an eye with like an X as the cross, as the iris.
Yeah.
And everything was red and black and white. And I registered the domain name, and I got my email address all set up, and I set up a website and everything. And I was doing so whatever people needed. I was doing web programming, web interface to database backends back before anybody had database backends, custom database work, all this kind of thing, graphics work. A lot of people just wanted me to do 3D art and turn them into animated GIFs, because this is back when animated GIFs were just starting to be a thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was when I
Amazing.
started. That was another income sort of thing. As people would be like, I need your help with this general computer type thing that I don't understand how to do it. And so I still have the domain name.
That's amazing.
I still have the email address. I still have the website, which I now use for Twitch. So for instance, the thing I wrote in your stream that pulls up the random crime person, that's hitting infozar.com, which
infozar.com,
is yeah. So that's why that exists. That's why my Twitch name is terrible, because I just use that because nobody's ever taken it. That's the thing. If you're signing up to a service that has 12 million users, you try typing your name in, it's taken. We suggest using your same name but misspell it and add a 664 at the end of it, and it's like, no, I don't want to deal with that. So I didn't think I was ever going to be streaming on Twitch. I just needed an account so I could type wise ass comments for during the pandemic. There's a local theater that used to do a thing once a month called Trash Night, and you go to the theater, which sold beer. I don't personally drink alcohol, but you have a theater full of people who are all drunk, rowdy, hilarious, and you're watching a terrible movie. And everybody's just shouting awesome things at the screen. It's basically your stream, but with bad movies instead of bad comics.
Fantastic.
And when the pandemic happened and shut that down, they moved it onto Twitch, which I didn't know anything about. But I knew, okay, I have the address. I went there, and I'm like, this is great. They're showing the movie on Twitch. Everybody in chat is typing the same wise-ass comments. I can't type unless I have an account. I'm going to create an account, and I just use the same name I always use for these things. And that's why I have a terrible Twitch username.
It's good.
Yay.
No, but that's not a terrible name then, because it's an excellent story. And that's the thing.
Okay, fair enough.
Now we can go back and watch
now we
25
go back and talk
years
about
ago.
the website, right?
Now we can talk about the website.
So the website, back in 1997, Apple was circling the drain.
That's true.
Everybody was waiting for Apple to go out of business. And every single news story that had anything to do with Apple at all always was painted in the light of, and the company's about to go out of business. They used to be way up here, and now they're about to go out of business, and we're all just waiting for it, you know? And so I was messing around with HTML. This is before CSS existed. I mean, I had this weird idea of, hey, they've just introduced the ability to have table cells have a color as a background.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Nice.
So here's my idea. Instead of putting up a graphic file, is it possible to make a table cell, huge table of code, where every single cell is 1 pixel by 1 pixel with a colored background, and make a picture just using code, HTML table cell? It's a terrible idea, but I was laid up with a broken foot, broken leg, and so I had all the time in the world to try this. And the answer is yes, you absolutely can.
Of course.
And also your browser will hate you for it, and your computer will crash, but you can do it. Yeah, you can totally do it. But that turned into me being sick of reading all this news about Apple about to be going out of business, even when it was good news. You know, it was like, oh, they just did this thing. It was really good, but they're going to go out of business anyway. So it was a soap opera. It was very much a soap opera. It was just, you know, people waiting. You know, everything was painted doom and gloom about everything, and you know, in many cases, rightfully so. But I got sick of it, and so I decided I'm going to make a satire. Yeah, I said I'm going to make a satire website. I'm going to make a website where it's just going to highlight 3 news stories about Apple every day, because there were plenty to choose from.
Okay.
And I'm going to write about it as if it's a soap opera. And I'm going to call the website As the Apple Turns. And it's going to look, I'm going to use the weird code I wrote so that I'm going to reproduce the windows are actually going to look like Mac windows.
Wow.
And I did. And that's what I did. And it weirdly took off among weird Apple people, of which I am one. So all the Mac people who are like just waiting for, you know, the end of the era, loved what I was doing. And it started out as just like a couple of melodramatic sentences with, you know, a link to this article, but it was snark. It was snark. You know, that was what the thing was. And it caught on, and it just turned into like a bigger and bigger thing. And eventually I was writing 1,500 words a day. Nice. Of humor and commentary about what was going on with Apple. And there was always drama with Apple. So I never, you know, the well never ran dry. For a while, it was literally 1,500 words a day, including weekends, like every day. Wow. And it just got more and more traction. It led to me writing articles for one of the bigger magazines at the time, which was Mac Addict Magazine. They used to hire me to write the annual April Fool's pranks article. So I'd have to like come up with technical pranks to install on Macs and things like that and write it up. And it led to all kinds of weird things. I actually guest lectured at UCLA a couple of times.
Really?
Remotely. Yeah. Way before Zoom existed, obviously. This is when Apple just released, what the heck was it even called? iChat AV.
Okay.
And one of my readers was like, I teach a class at UCLA on new media. I would like you to do a guest lecture for my class, and I would like to do it over iChat AV. Can we try it? I was like, yeah, sure. And it was awesome. I'm like looking at a class, you know, and I'd be like, you know, somebody's raising their hand. I'm like, yeah, you in the striped shirt, 3rd row, you know, and then you'd walk over with the camera and we'd be face to face. He'd ask me a question, I'd answer. I mean, we did this this was like maybe the year 2000, 2001. And we were doing, you know, what everybody is doing on Zoom now, but it was 20 years ago.
What's happening?
It was fun. I got to do a lot of things. I got to speak at, you know, conventions, conferences and things like that. I did a thing on like, somebody wanted me to speak at a thing of like, you know, 10 uses for a dead Mac. You know, I was just coming up with I turned one into a pizza box that I brought with me with a pizza in it. And, you know, because the classic is turning the old ones into an aquarium, the Macquarium. That's like a real thing. So I started with that and I just like took off from there. But yeah, I did, I was getting recognized in, I mean, it was one thing to be recognized in a computer store, which happened. But I was like going to like music shows and people were coming up to me and they're being like, are you the guy that does this website? And I'm like, I don't need, it's not a video site. Like I'm writing words. How do you even know what I look like? Like, why is this a thing? And it was like, that's because crazy. I'm wearing the t-shirt on the merch page. You know, I'm like, this is what the shirt looks like when you wear it. And they're like, oh yeah, I recognize you from the merch thing. Will you sign this? And it was like, this is really weird. But it was cool. I mean, like literally when Apple first started opening stores, like I was covering that whole thing because everybody was like, they didn't have stores. You know, now everybody knows Apple stores. Folks, Apple didn't have stores. They used to sell computers in Sears. That was where you got a Macintosh. You went to Sears or what was the other thing? CompUSA.
Oh, CompUSA. You know? Okay.
Remember that? Right. And they were always broken. You know, that was the big thing. We're like, nobody will ever understand how good these computers might be because you're selling them in crappy ways. And so that was one of the things Steve Jobs did was like we need to fix this. We're going to open our own stores.
Right.
So we used to go to the openings. It'd be like the first store opening in the area, in the entire New England area, is going to be in New Hampshire. I'm going to be there. And I'll bring some t-shirts just in case somebody, but if you see me, say hi. People would be like in line to get like autographs and things. I'm like, this is really weird. This is really, really weird. But people were like coming up to me starstruck and things. So
it seems like
I got
plugged into you plugged into the right thing at the right time right then, it seems like. And
yeah, maybe
you were this is something I'm finding interesting about a lot of your stories, and that maybe I'm going to ask you if you can give people advice on it, actually, in a way. I know you don't give unsolicited advice, but I will
well,
ask if you have some tips, because this gives me the impression that, okay, it seems like if you're curious about something or have a strong interest in something, you've been able to explore it, learn about it, and find a creative way to express that in your own way. Like you're talking about this website. Magic is another thing. Your own, the degree, trying to go to these schools, music. It sounds like you've been in the music scene a lot as well, skateboarding. And it seems like you found a way, like, vegan baking. That was another one. Like, okay, we found a way to, okay, you had your t-shirts for this. You took it to a far level. Same thing with the baking. You seem to take it to a far level. Here you are on Twitch with Magic. Your stream takes things to another level. It's one of the reasons I like your stream, is you've got you've got a lot of interactivity. There's a lot of stuff going on there, and you're taking it to another level. So, and that seems to be working for you. That seems to be working for you as far as I can tell. So, I think a lot of people have a hard time taking some of their interests and following it to its furthest degree. So maybe, why do you think you were able to do so many of these different things? Is there areas that people could emulate or model that, or is it really just that's who you were and whatnot?
I think a lot of it comes down to luck, to be honest, but also it's because you're hearing about the things that worked out.
Oh, that's
which
true.
is how it always happens, right?
Like success
I think,
bias.
Yeah, exactly. It's just there have definitely been things that I've started that I've then just been like, I can't make this work. I'm bailing. The most important thing to me is that I have a really terrible attention span. I get bored with things really quick.
Fair enough.
So I'm always, I think, trying to change things. Here's an example. Back when I was doing websites for people, like as part of the whole InfoZar Productions thing, the first time I made like a PHP based website with a MySQL backend and got it working, and it all worked great and everything, that was great. I was, going great guns. I built this thing myself. I put it all together. They were super happy with it. And then somebody else wanted me to do the exact same thing for them. And I just couldn't make myself do it. I mean, I accepted the job and I eventually had to tell them, I'm sorry, I can't do it. I was just I didn't want to do it again. I didn't want to do it. Like, it was just like, I'm doing the same thing. It was exciting then because I'd never done it before. And it was a challenge because I'd never done it. And I didn't know how to do it. And I had to make my own solution for that. And then when I knew how to do it, it was like, this isn't very interesting. And, the website wasn't interesting. The group I was putting it together for wasn't interesting. And so I couldn't just make myself do it for the paycheck. If I were hungrier, I would have done it. For sure. Like, I think it's great. It can be a great motivator. Obviously, if you need that paycheck, you're going to make it work. You're going to make it happen. But in this case, I wasn't hungry enough to finish that job.
Okay.
It was just not interesting to me. But I think when I think back, because again, I haven't really thought about a lot of this, but we're telling all these weird stories that I hadn't thought about in ages. I think what I'm starting to realize maybe is going on is part of it is that I have no attention span and I get bored doing the same things twice. So when I do have to do the same thing again, I'm usually changing it in a way, trying to make it more interesting and or better.
Mm.
But most importantly, I usually don't like doing something that somebody's already done. Because that, it's done. I can just copy that. That's fine. And if I need something, like if I need a piece of code to do something weird on my stream, and I know I have to write the script to do it, I can't just sit down and write the code. I don't have that facility, but I know enough about how it works where I can dig around online and be like, okay, here's somebody who did it that way. Okay, cool. I can figure out how to replicate that. That's fine because it's in the service of, in the last time I had to do this, making it so that if somebody redeems channel points or cheers an exact certain number of bits, a tombstone pops up that shows how they just died, and it's random every time. Amazing. And I love that. And I was like, I want it to look etched into the stone. I want it to be their username. I want it to be the current date. And I want it to be a random cause of death selected from like these 50 stupid things I typed in.
Nice.
And I want all that to work automatically so I don't have to do a thing. They just pay the points and it happens. And so, yeah, I had to dissect a lot of other people's code and be like, why isn't this working? This doesn't make any sense. Oh, it's because there's a space in there. So I had to do this I write terrible code. So anytime there's a space in the cause of death, I have to put it in as 3 X's. Oh. And then my code changes all the 3 X's back into a space when it shows up on the thing, because the command I'm using can't parse the spaces, and I can't escape them out because of just the limitations of the software. So it's like I get drawn into these stupid things to fix.
Yeah.
Once I fixed it once, I'm not interested in fixing it again, and I move on to another project. But I sometimes I get a little bit too focused on the quality aspect. So something that I'm like, oh, this will take me 20 minutes a day. Like the original website was like, this won't take me more than 20, 30 minutes a day. Eventually, by the end, it was unsustainable because I was spending 9 hours a day writing content for that website while I had a full-time job.
There it is.
Well, actually, by then I didn't have a full-time job. That was when I was trying to raise a toddler. And I would stay up all night after raising a toddler all day. I'd try to stay up all night for 9 hours writing content. And that was when it just burned out. I couldn't do it anymore. Yeah. There was literally a time when there was a Wikipedia page about me. Doesn't exist now, because I was the guy behind that website.
Wow.
And people thought I died.
People thought you died.
Because I just ghosted that site. I didn't want to shut it down. I didn't want to go and admit to people, I can't do this anymore. I'm shutting it down. I kept thinking to myself, if I just, in another day, I'll be okay and I can get back to it. And then that day stretched to a week, to a month, to a year, and I just left it behind.
Yeah, it was over. Sometimes
and people
it's hard to
really
know.
thought I died. And I would find postings online of people that I didn't know who swear they knew me and said that I died.
Wow.
And so there was a Wikipedia page about me that was like, there's 2 things, like, he may have died this way or this way, according to these people. And also, we think he might have been fake Steve Jobs. There used to be a website called Fake Steve Jobs, where it was a satire of Steve Jobs and somebody. And I absolutely was not fake Steve Jobs. I think people know who it is now. I think if you go look it up, they're like, it was definitely this person. But for a while, nobody knew who it was, and they thought it was me. It's been a very weird and dumb life, to be honest. Like I'm happy with it. But when I say these things to you, I'm like, what is this life? What even happened? I don't understand. Like I'm hearing these words come out of my mouth and I'm like, I don't know what this is. Like
I think there's a lot of beauty in that. There's a lot of beauty in that.
Yeah, maybe.
To have it go in a strange direction and let it be this weird road that winds and turns and goes in whatever direction that happened to work for you at the time.
Well, that's the thing. Like, so to your question about like what would I tell people? How did I make this work? I don't know. I don't know if it would work for anybody else, but I think I just get obsessed about doing the weird thing, maybe doing the thing that somebody hasn't done before, or at least doing the thing that in a way that somebody hasn't done it before, you know? And a lot of times it'll just be a joke that gets taken too far, because that's what I do, is I take things too far. So a good example of that was a pandemic project I had where I run every day. I don't run as much at a time as I used to. At my peak, I was running like a quarter marathon every night. But now it's like maybe 2-3 miles, but I still run every day.
Nice.
Haven't missed a day in almost 3 years, coming up on 3 years. January 1st, 2020 is when I started this streak.
Well done.
At least a mile every day. And for a long time. In 2020, I ran one. Would you like an example of how obsessive I am? In 2020, I ran every day, and the grand total at the end of the year was exactly 2,222.22 miles.
Wow. So like you were aiming for that, clearly.
I planned it out. It was ridiculous. Like originally it was, I signed up to do a thing where you try to run, I don't remember what it was. It was like 100 kilometers in 3 months or something. And then I was like way ahead of that. And then I was like extrapolating out. I was like, I think I can make 2,000 miles by the end of the year. And then I was going to pass that. And I'm like, okay, new goal, 2,222.22. Let's see if we can do it. All twos. And I just like, I'm watching December 31st. Stop right there. Okay, perfect. Put it into the spreadsheet. There's the total, done. But what I was saying, that's not the obsessive part. I know it sounds like it is, but that wasn't it. The obsessive part was, I can't really be outside in the daylight. I am medically vampiric.
Oh, wow.
I've had things cut off of my skin, basically my doctor said, did you know that everybody's skin has a set limit for how much ultraviolet radiation it can absorb before you basically start getting cancer? I was like, no, I didn't know that. He's like, yeah, you're there. So you need to wear sunscreen all the time. I'm like, even if I'm inside, like, what if I'm at work? He's like, do you have a window in your office? I'm like, yeah. He's like, yep.
Wow.
Every 2 hours, sunscreen on. So instead I just bricked up the window at work. So solved that problem.
That'll help.
But yeah, so I used to run outside in the daylight. Can't do that anymore. So I usually run at night, but running at night has its own problems.
Can be dangerous.
Lighting, all that kind of thing. So mostly I was running on a treadmill, especially at the height of the pandemic when we did not know if it was safe to be running outside among people. You probably remember there were all these things like, oh, runners are leaving a trail of microbes behind them and infecting people. So I was just like, I just don't want to deal with it. I've got a treadmill. I'm just going to run inside. It was like an hour on the treadmill every night or whatever. But that's super boring.
Okay. So
I said, I'm going to watch horror movies while I run on the treadmill. And that works great.
There it is.
But then I had the dumb joke, the dad joke. I texted my daughter. I said, I watch horror movies while I'm on the treadmill every night. I should start a blog called Running Scared.
It's fantastic.
I'm like, yeah, womp womp.
It writes itself. Joke. It writes itself, though.
Well, they immediately replied with, do it.
Of course, do it.
I was like, no. See, I was just making do it. And I was like, okay, fine. So I made a blog called Running Scared, which was literally me reviewing the movies I watched every night while I was running on a treadmill. And that was unsustainable because, again, if it were just a couple of paragraphs, knock it off, done, it's a dumb blog post, which is how it started. Instead, it turned into, again, I'm spending 4 hours writing a review of a terrible movie.
Yeah, it's funny like that.
And I did like maybe 50 or something of them. And they're still up there. And I still send people the links to things because I can't remember if you were there when we were talking about Veronica, which is one of the worst movies I've ever seen. I think it was in your chat.
You suggested to look at it and say this is one of the worst movies.
It was in your chat. Okay. I was pretty sure it was in your chat, but I wasn't 100% sure. But yeah, so Jamie was in the chat, and so I posted in your chat a link to my review of Veronica, the Glenn Danzig horror movie.
Yeah, with Danzig, that's what got me singing Mother. Yeah, I
Mother,
remember now.
exactly. I definitely recommend seeing it, but it's awful. It's really bad. And I went back to it recently because I'm like, maybe I just missed it. Maybe I missed the joke. I don't think I did. I think it's taking itself really seriously. And I think Glenn Danzig thinks it's a really good movie.
That's the thing,
Which is terrifying. But I got to give you one example from this movie.
Okay.
I think the line in the review was something like, the movie had an editor, according to the credits, although there's no other indication of that fact.
Okay.
Because there's a scene, I swear to God, it feels like they told the actress, okay, do this, keep doing this. Basically, she's like a Countess Elizabeth Bathory type character who likes to bathe in the blood of virgins to stay young and beautiful, right?
Got it. Yeah.
This is the level of the movie we're talking about.
Fantastic.
But so she's gotten out of the giant tub of blood, and she's standing in front of the mirror, and she basically is standing admiring her form in front of the mirror, and then she'll like touch her face, and she'll lean in, and she'll come back and admire her form, and then she'll touch her face and lean in, and it keeps happening. And
I didn't know to cut.
It felt like, she was told, just keep doing this. We'll get a lot of footage, and we'll shoot, we'll edit. But they used it
coverage.
all.
We're getting coverage.
Yeah.
And they used
but
everything
the whole thing
she
is
does
that
at 8
I had
times.
to rewind. I had to rewind and time it. It's over a minute. It's over a minute.
Whoa.
No dialogue. And after a minute, they cut to a shot of her like handmaiden or something, basically looking at her doing this. And then they cut back to her again, and then it goes on for another 20 seconds. It's just like,
so we're at 120 seconds. We're at 80. Okay,
it's bonkers. I can't figure it out. I just don't understand what I'm looking at.
There is something about that, a juxtaposition between between like earnestly trying really hard and failing really bad to do this, and then you watch it and go like, is this, like you just said, is that serious? Were you really trying to do this? I mean, that's what it is with the comics as well, because I do feel like there's a crossroads between it's kind of awesome, and maybe in the 50s it was awesome, but right now it's not awesome. So we can kind of laugh and make jokes, and then some of the they didn't flesh everything out, but that is farther than I've really seen in a lot of movies. What you're describing,
it's so weird. And again, I did have to go back to it like a couple of years later because sometimes I've definitely seen a movie and not gotten the joke, or I've seen an episode of a show and been like, that was the worst episode that they've ever made because I didn't get it. And then I'd watch it again later and be like, oh, okay, I see. It's basically self-parody or something like that, But this doesn't feel like it to me. And I went back to check, and maybe I'm still missing the joke. But to me, it really feels like he really thought he was making a good movie.
I think a lot of times it is that way. I think it is that way a lot of the time with movies. Everyone's making, Citizen Kane. Everyone's filming Citizen Kane on the day. When you're on the set, it's like, oh, we're all taking this real serious. And then, that after the cutting room, the truth is yet to be seen. So, that happens.
Yep.
But it is fun.
But yeah, so again, I take things too far.
Taking things too far.
I don't know if it's a secret to success or if it's just, I don't sleep. It's a problem. I should be sleeping way more than I do. I'm generally a very healthy person, and I generally take really good care of myself, with the single notable exception, I'm really bad about sleeping enough, and it's killing me. I mean, you look at in college, I was taking a psychology course because it fulfilled one of the humanities requirements, I figured that's a good course to take, and it turns out it was a good course to take because I learned a lot of stuff that I use in magic, right? But we had to do a term paper. We had to do like a big research paper. And I said, I'm going to do mine on sleep deprivation because I've already got all this firsthand knowledge. So I did all the research, And so I'm very aware at how much I'm damaging myself by not getting enough sleep.
Oh,
Don't look
man.
it up. If you're the kind of person who doesn't get enough sleep and you're not likely to change that, don't look it up, because it's just going to make you depressed.
Oh,
You
man.
are killing yourself.
But I
But
mean, aren't some people genetically predisposed into having less sleep and needing less sleep? Maybe you're
yes,
not dying as bad as I'm just hoping.
yes,
I'm hoping you're okay.
I'm pretty sure that is the case. But again, speaking of ways in which I differ greatly from my girlfriend, I will frequently, for long periods of time, get between 2 and 4 hours of sleep a night. She needs I mean, 8 is bare minimum. Like 8 is not good. Eight is a tough time for her.
Okay.
A lot of times, if she comes over, I'll stream on a Saturday night. I'll end 10:30, 11. She'll come over. We'll watch a couple of shows. So maybe she'll pass out, say 1:30, something like
Okay.
that. We'll get up at like 10:30 the next day, so like 9 hours. But then we'll eat breakfast and go back to bed for like 4 more hours. I
Hmm.
mean, she just physically needs a lot more sleep than not just me, but probably most people.
Got it.
And everybody's different. Like that's a perfectly okay thing, but
If you're the
I
exact opposite, like you said, yeah, that's a
well, and it makes me terrified. Like if that ever happened to me, where I had to lose like 6 to 8 more hours in a day, I mean, I don't have enough time now. Like I don't know what I would do if I had to lose
yeah.
that time. So she goes back to sleep. I'll do the laundry. I'll run. I'll get my run done for the day, or I'll just like work on things, because I just can't sleep that much.
Man.
In part because there's too much to do. I don't know.
No doubt. Also, there's a few things there. One, don't sleep that much, or be a person who doesn't sleep that much. Be a person who can't go outside that much. I guess if we're talking about advice for
Yeah,
people, um,
yeah. I mean, that's relatively new. That was just a few years ago
oh,
when
okay,
I got the diagnosis.
got
But
it. I'm sorry to hear that too. By the way, I mean, I guess that's a little
yeah, no,
rough.
it's fine. I actually hate the sun.
Oh,
So if it
well
was going to
then,
happen to anybody, it should happen to me,
you're the
because
guy.
it's kind of great. And also, it means if somebody invites me to like a barbecue, I have a built-in excuse to not go to the barbecue.
So there you have
But
it.
barbecues are tricky because there's no bookshelf to
No
stare at
bookshelf,
the titles of the books.
and generally,
You actually have to interact with people.
it's not all that
So,
vegan at a barbecue a lot of the time. So
well,
that's
that's tricky too. Oh
nothing for
man,
you.
when I got that first job right out of college, that was also my first year being vegan. And I'm like the new guy, the low guy in the totem pole, and this is the only job offer I even got a call back for. Like, this is it. This job is it for me. If I don't keep this job, I'm, moving to a
And
cardboard
and
box down by the river.
now you're vegan.
Well, that was the thing. So I started it was like August, September maybe. And a couple of weeks into the job, it's like, oh, there's going to be a big cookout at, well, like the lead programmer's like beach house in New Hampshire. And this guy is, very, like, you can just look at him and it's like, there's going to be a steer roast. You just know. There's going to be like a roast pig and an entire cow and a thing. And it's like, all right, I guess I'm going. I guess, me and my partner are going to this thing, and we're bringing. And this is not at a time when you could just like go to a Whole Foods and get like, oh look, vegan ribs. No, that didn't exist. You had to make that. You had to make that from scratch. We're looking around through vegan punk zines, photocopied vegan punk zines, which is the only way we got recipes in those days. And trying to bring something that we can bring to this thing without seeming enough like a freak to get fired over, because I couldn't say no to this. I couldn't like not go. It was horrible. I hated that. I hated everything about that experience.
Yeah, that's
Um,
rough. That's rough.
that guy eventually died. Uh,
Okay.
I'm chuckling, but I'm pretty sure it was like heart failure. I'm pretty sure,
Yeah.
it was kind of what you would expect of a guy who had like a suckling pig and a side of beef roasting at his beach house
It's a
cookout.
lot.
But
It's a lot. Eating is a whole thing. I think that's one thing. Anybody, whatever your diet ends up being, probably it's a thing
you
to
gotta be
look
careful.
into. Be careful. Look into
Yeah,
it. See
you
how
got to be
things are
careful about
affecting
it.
you. But
Yeah, Yeah. And
I
I'm
am
not
thinking,
saying like, everybody should, like we were talking about this on my stream today.
sure,
I'm
yeah.
definitely not saying everybody should be vegan. Um, but it's good to be aware, I think, of what you're ingesting and how it's affecting you. So uh, I have not mentioned my guiding philosophy for decades now really has been try not to make any decisions by default,
Uh,
right? So no matter what you do, and these days I feel like they would just call that mindfulness. I don't really like the word or the phrase because I feel like it's got weird things attached to it. But fundamentally, yeah, that's what it is. It's like, are you doing this because you thought about it and have decided it's best for you, or are you doing this because it's how everybody else does it?
yeah.
You know, and for most people, that's what diet comes down to: is what you eat is you're eating it because everybody else eats that too. Um, and so I thought about it at first, and I was like, when it comes to my ethical choices for food, it just comes down to, if you put a cow in front of me and said, "Here's a hammer," I'm not killing that cow. It's just never going to happen. Um, so I'm also not going to pay somebody else to do it. That's all it comes down to for me. It's
Makes
just it's
sense.
that simple. Um, and of course, I have the privilege to make that decision. It's
Of
like,
course, yeah.
because I can make that decision, I'm going to make that decision. But obviously, like, there's people all over the world where they don't have the choice in the matter. Like, you eat this or you don't eat. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I have a choice, and my choice is I would not kill that animal to eat it. So I'm not paying somebody else to do it for me, just so that I don't have to deal with the ickiness of it. Um,
Totally understandable. I do think that too. I mean, if it does feel that way, if you're willing to go hunting and can't do this, then that's fine. But if you feel like you would, if you feel like you would feel bad, or it's like, oh, I really don't want to have to deal with that, well, then there's more to think about.
it's worth examining why you feel that way and whether you still want to continue doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. Like, and the reason I brought it up was because early on, the vegetarian thing was enough. I thought of, like, well, okay, I know a bit about why people are vegan, and I did a little bit of research. I'm like, I'm comfortable not being vegan. I'm just gonna, like, I don't want to kill anything or pay somebody to kill something just so I can eat something that tastes good. I'm not comfortable with that, but I'm totally okay with dairy, with eggs and things like that. And then like a year later, I thought about it again, and I'm like, I'm not actually comfortable with that, because it's all the same industry. I'm still just giving money to the same people to exploit the same things and kill the same. So again, it's just like, the biggest challenge for me is, once I've examined a question and come up with an answer that's good for me and adopted it, the biggest challenge for me is then not calcifying that and saying this is how it's going to be forever. Because people change. I, more than anyone I know, I think, am guilty of I'm going to stick this way. I decided, I went straight edge at like 19. I'm still straight edge.
Great.
I don't know anybody else who's 50 and straight edge. Never heard of it. Doesn't
Right.
exist. But that also means I'm like one of the few people who has straight edge tattoos who doesn't feel like maybe I should get that removed, or maybe at least I don't show it to people. But it's easy to fall into the trap of, I thought about this, I made the decision, and I feel good about myself for not having done something by default. The downside is, now that's the default for me. So I need to get better about constantly reevaluating that and being like, is that still what I want to do, or am I just doing it because that's what I've been doing? Is it the new default? And
Yeah. Well, I mean, is there a way to have a built-in, like, I guess at some point, a built-in re-examination of yourself, your life, and your circumstances at some point? I think that's good to do.
You kind of can.
You can get lost. I think that's the kind of thing that's more of a sharpening the saw sort of thing that can get not done. You're like, hey, we're busy cutting these trees down. You got to stop. You can't be cutting trees down while we're sharpening the saw, but the trees will go down faster if we sharpen the saw. So yeah, I don't know.
Right.
It can be tough, I think, to find the time for the re-examination. And I found this worked, but it doesn't work now. And I think I'm interested to hear what you have to say about this, because like, I know probably for the past 3 straight years, everyone says because of the pandemic, something, but I feel like a lot of people's lives did shift. Maybe a lot of the visions you had for what you were going to do. I know personally that was the case. You know, I used to travel like 5 months out of the year. You'll hear me on stream talking about going to Japan all the time for the whole summer, every single year, going to France, going to whatever. That was kind of the plan. You know, I stayed in a small apartment. I literally guided all of my finances, my business decisions, all the things I learned to do for that. And then it's kind of like, oh, well, is that really great for us? Like me and my wife, is that going to be what we're going to actually be doing now that we're at this point with all this stuff? So it could change. So that's an example. But from what you're saying, it's kind of like, hey, yeah, just because you decided to be vegan or decided that you are going to be straight edge or whatever it is. Now, these are probably very good decisions, especially for your health and that you could re-examine them and say they're going to work out. They're still working for me very well. But just 10 years can go by where maybe it stopped working for you 2 years ago or something. And, you know, how do we fit that in? What do you do? Is there something that you do to keep that, or is it a constant day-to-day thing?
It's the thing that should be something I do more often. Again, you know, that's the big failing is I fall into the trap of I didn't do the default thing. I was true to my plan. I examined the question. I came up with the answer that was right for me, and I acted on it. But then that becomes the new default, and I never think about it again, you know, and to my detriment. So it's interesting when you mentioned that. What I flashed on was there's a whole framework of there's a productivity method basically called Getting Things Done, GTD. There's a whole book you can read. Yeah. So I don't follow that whole thing. I use small elements from that because I find it too constrictive. But I do use small elements from that. There's some things that are really great about it. Like if you come upon a task that will take 2 minutes or less to finish, don't add it to the list, just do it. Yeah. You know, so I adopt little things like that, and it helps me actually get things done. And there's really great software, many softwares that work within this framework. They're built specifically for people who follow these things. One of them I use myself, and it doesn't automatically. So one of the things about getting things done, you know, one of the things you're supposed to do is in regular increments, you're supposed to look at everything you've set out and evaluate everything and be like, I haven't made any progress on this project in months, and there's no reason for me to move forward with it, so I should remove it. You know, you're supposed to be evaluating regularly, like whether it be once a week, once a month, whatever. You're supposed to go through all of your projects and lists and decide, are they really active? Should they be shelved? Should they just be removed completely? All that kind of stuff. That's the kind of thing that, like, you've made me think about. Like, that would be a good general idea to, even it's something just like maybe on your birthday every year.
Oh, yeah.
You get a year older, maybe you have a list of the big life decisions you've made about who you are and what you do, and reevaluate. Like, that might be the best way to do it for me. I don't know.
It could be. If that's the time you're being introspective.
Yeah, because also maybe once a year is not enough, but it's certainly better than never.
Yeah, if it's zero.
And it's much easier to remember if it's something like, it's rare. I feel most people don't miss their own birthday.
Yeah, you know it's there.
So if you can tie it to something like that, then maybe that's the solution. Maybe I'll try that. I got a birthday coming up in a couple months, so I'll see if this works. I think it's a good idea. I think you've given me a good path forward.
I think you found yourself that, but, you know, I mean, that's the point of conversation, I think, too, is, you know, it sparks ideas with each other. But look, I know it's starting. We've been talking for a long time. I think this might be the longest I've talked to somebody so far.
It's ridiculous.
But no, I'm enjoying it very much. I guess, you know what, I will hit you with, I don't know what you have planned or if you have something that you want to do, but I will hit you with the main question the only question really that I repeat
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's sort of like a rapid fire. Usually, it's beauty battle in business. We've heard some of the struggles. We've heard some of the business and some of the things. Oh, and I did want to say this though. I think we did get advice. We were talking. I said, "What advice do you think it could be?" And you said a couple things. I do think we did get some advice there though, even though we went in a
Okay.
lot of directions. And I think those two. I just wanted to say, you said a lot of times it's a joke that's gone too far because I'm taking it too far. Well, and another thing you said, you talked about hitting that two mileage
Yeah.
in your running, and you did it by planning that out. And so I
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
feel like that gives you, and being intentional. I feel like that all ties
Yeah.
together a little bit. Do you want to hit some of these things? Do you want to do something? Well, it might be a
Yeah.
joke. It might be crazy. It might seem to you silly.
Yep.
However, to others, it may not be. And so if you just take it to as far as it can go, then you're going to be able to see it might flop too. You said you had some things that just couldn't
Oh,
keep
for
going
sure.
or couldn't happen, but that might
Yeah.
flop. But the way you can take it far is by saying, well, if I was going to do this, and that again, this brings us right back to magic, where you said, like, let's reverse engineer. I want this to happen. Now, how can I
Right.
reverse engineer this thing? So start making a plan. If I wanted this joke of mine that I think is silly, some crazy pie in the sky thing, if I really wanted it to happen, what would I do? And then plan that out, make a plan, and then see it and be ready for yourself to have some problems. You'll probably have some challenges. You'll probably have to rework everything a bunch of times. However, you might be surprised at the results is kind of that's the advice you didn't say that, but I think I'm taking
Well,
that from from the stories you told.
I agree with all that, and I also paradoxically, simultaneously, think the exact opposite. Because
Wow.
if I had planned out really all the ridiculous things that I want, I never would have done them. If I had tried to plan them out, I never would have done it because I'm much more. Actually, it's a thing that comes up in mathematics. I think, like, isn't it something like a drunken walking thing? I was never big on math, but the idea that you're just traversing something without looking too far forward, you're just going to the next step. So that kind of ties into a strategy that I learned about in college when I was learning about AI before. I mean, AI now is not like AI in the early 90s,
Hmm.
but there's a common there was a very common strategy that was used when building artificial intelligences back then. So meaning like you needed to program a chess game. You needed to write a program that would play chess against somebody. And so the thing is called progressive deepening, or it was at the time. I don't know if this exists anymore, but I use this all the time. I learned this again as a teenager in college, and I use this every day. The idea being that if you need to write a computer program that's going to react to a chess move, somebody does the move, and now the computer has 30 seconds, let's say, arbitrarily, 30 seconds to make the best move possible. The way we used to do it is you would program the computer to, first of all, pick any move that's a valid move. Like, obviously, you don't want it to have a rook move diagonally. That's not legal. So, any legal move, regardless of what it's going to do to the gameplay, and then save that. How much time do you have left? 29.9 seconds. Okay, great. Now let's look for a better move. And if that
Yeah.
move, if you run out of time, you've got the move that, the bad move, but legal to fall back on. But now you've looked one level deep. You've examined every legal move, and you've compared it against what they can do after you make each one of these moves. And you've computed, let's say, the score of the board based on how many pieces of each type. And so now you've found a better move because you've looked one level deep. And now you've got 20 seconds left. Okay, forget the first one, save the second one. Now, let's look 2 levels deep and see if we can find a better move than this one based on whatever our criteria are. We ran out of time? Okay, use the second move. But if we find one Okay, great. Forget that second one. Now we've got this third one. And I use this all the time. And I use this when I was working at that first job at the medical company. We'd get a phone call, and the hospital would say, the computer just died. Right now, we're in the middle of a case. The patient has the head frame screwed into their skull, and the computer has died. What do we do?
It's heavy.
And it would be my job to fix this. And I'd be like, okay, progressive deepening. Let's do this. We've got an extra computer that we use for training and demos that's in the demo room that's set up with the software. You go break it down, pack it up, get it into packing cases, and get ready to get on a plane. You're going to work on bringing this huge computer on a plane, fly to Texas from Boston, get in there, so that, because this was an important patient. It was like the governor's son was getting cancer treatment with this thing.
Even bigger stakes.
Right. So I was just like, that's level one. That's the only legal move. You start getting a replacement computer to carry on board a plane, fly down there, and get it running so they can do this case. Meanwhile, your partner is calling, trying to find the flight. So that's step one. Get somebody there with a computer. Meanwhile, if we don't run out of time, which is based on when you would have to physically leave to go to the airport to get on this flight, we're going to try to fix the computer remotely. Is there anybody there who knows Unix workstations and things like that? Great. You happen to be a university hospital. Awesome. Connect us to the computer science department. Hey, your teaching hospital has this system. It's HPUX 9000. Anybody there? No. Yeah. Great. Okay. You get over there. Okay. You tech support people. Talk to this guy. Try to see if he can fix the So it's just like staging these things out and trying to find one solution, no matter how bad it is. Then you try to find a better one, and then a better one. And when you run out of time, you use the best one you found.
Nice.
And I use that all the time. I use that constantly.
That is fantastic.
It's an important, for me, it's been a very important strategy. But again, this kind of, it goes hand in hand with the idea of that if I do plan too far ahead, I'll never get anything done.
That's a good point.
So I did not start out 2020 intending to run every day. I happened to notice 5 days into the year, I had run every day, which I'd never run 5 days in a row before. I said, let's see how long we can take this. Let's see how far we can take this. Can I keep this streak going for another week? The rule is, if I get injured, I'm not going to try to run through it because I already made that mistake. And then I wound up not being able to walk for a month, let alone run for like 6 months.
Yeah.
So I learned from making dumb, terrible mistakes. So that was the thing. I'm going to run every day, at least a mile. If I get injured or if I start feeling hurt at all, I'm stopping. And it's actually been really great because this is the longest I've ever not been injured.
Amazing.
Again, almost 3 years I've run every day, and I've had minor injuries, and then I'm running real slow, really short, just to keep this streak going. And if it feels wrong, I'm stopping and the streak ends, and that's it, done. But I never set out to run for 3 years straight every day at all. It was just, I've run 5 days in a row. Let's see if we can make it 6. Let's see if we can get through the end of January, maybe. Now there's this thing that somebody says, maybe try to run 1,000 kilometers in 3 months or something. Let's try that. That's an average of like a little over a 5K every day. Maybe I can do that, And then it ends up being, I ran over 2,000 miles in a year, and I have almost run 3 years every day without missing a day. That's awesome. If you set out with that, me at least, if I set out with that goal, no, I'm not making it. It's not going to happen. For me, it's an iterative process. And I continually take things to stupider and stupider levels. So it was the same thing with Twitch. It was like, let's see if we can do some magic on Twitch. And now it's just, we got all these ridiculous redemption things popping up all over the place. And every time somebody is like, maybe add this, I'm like, okay. Sure. I'll spend 6 hours adding that because it sounds like it will be funny. Let's go ahead and do it. And it just, everything just snowballs and accumulates. And the running scared thing, again, one dumb dad joke over text message turns into something that consumed my life for like 6 months. The As the Apple Turns website, it was intended to be a dumb joke. It ended up being like a money-making business for like 6 years. Like there was 1 month where just in advertising revenue, and merch sales, I think it was unusual, but I had 1 month that was like several $1,000s.
Wow.
You know,
Okay.
and it was a dumb joke taken too far. So
That's
I don't
awesome.
plan these things out. When I do plan things out, things usually go wrong for me.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that's crazy good. I'm very happy that you
I'm just jumping from rock
cleared
to
that
rock.
up.
I'm not
'Cause-
looking like I have no idea how far across the river it is, but there's a rock. I'm standing on this rock. I'm pretty sure I can get to that rock. So I jumped to that rock. I didn't fall in. Great. Now I'm in the middle of the river and there's no more rocks. Maybe that happens. Sometimes it does, and I've got to go back, you know. But I'm just jumping from rock to rock. I can't, if I look too far ahead, I have no idea. Now, sometimes that's different. When the pandemic first happened, I looked at the numbers. I mean, I have a science background. I'm not a scientist by any stretch of the imagination, but I have enough of a science background where when I looked at the numbers and I looked at what was going on, I knew very well it wasn't going to be like, oh, this will disappear by April,
Yeah,
like
was
all that
obvious.
nonsense. But early on, I was like, this is guaranteed going to be at least a year. And at that point, I was like, thank God I do long distance running, because if I came to that conclusion and I didn't do long distance running, I would just panic. But instead, I was like, all right, we can do this, or I can do this. I don't know if other people can do it, but other people were not thinking that it was going to be a year. I mean,
I
I had
found that
tickets to a
crazy.
puppet show.
Oh, okay,
I had
sorry.
tickets to a puppet show. Golden Girls, the Golden Girls puppet show. I got tickets for me and my girlfriend. She loves Golden Girls. It's a
Okay.
great puppet show, by the way. If it comes to your town, absolutely go see it if it's safe. But you will not believe the person they've got doing the voice of B. Arthur's character is the voice of B. Arthur. Dead on. This guy sounds more like B. Arthur than B. Arthur does. My girlfriend literally is a speech language pathologist. She knows everything about phoneme, speech, all, accents, everything. She's like,
Wow.
that is dead on. Like, she would know the difference. We were
Amazing.
stunned. But the thing is, I bring it up because we had tickets to this thing, which of course they canceled because of lockdown. They rescheduled it for 3 weeks later.
Come on. Okay.
This was like April of 2020.
Yeah.
And I was like, huh. So some people really think this is going to be gone in 3 weeks. And then they rescheduled it again for 3 months later, and then 9 months later. And it's like, it's slowly dawning on them that this is going to take longer. But yeah, early on, I was like, this is going to be a minimum of a year. There's no way this is going to be less than a year before things are even remotely normal. I certainly didn't think we were going to be approaching year 4.
Oh, really?
Because I'm maybe a little bit too optimistic in that people would do the right thing. I'm still incredibly bitter that we could have been done with this in 3 months, and now we're 3 years in. But yeah, that's one of those cases where I could look forward, and I was lucky enough to be of a mindset where it didn't cripple me.
Yeah.
To say, all right, I've never run a marathon, but it was the idea of, okay, I can do this. I just need to take it slowly. But yeah, in terms of like the stuff that has worked out for me, and it seems like somehow a lot of times same with me. It's just like, how did this happen? Why am I charmed for this to have happened? A lot of times, I think it's just because I'm not looking far enough ahead to be discouraged.
That's true.
I'm just running with the joke. It's a joke, or it's a dumb meme or something like that, or it's something that I said, I've always wanted to do this. I'm just going to do it and see what happens. And then I just keep taking it farther just because it's a thing to do. And either it works or it doesn't. And Penn and Teller, the magicians, in one of their books, they have a brilliant strategy. I read about this when I was maybe in high school or maybe it was early college, and it stuck with me. It's the notion of no permanent damage.
Mm.
So their strategy is, if the worst thing that happens as a result of something go wrong is that you look stupid in front of a lot of people, do it.
It's
It's
nothing.
fine. No permanent damage. But if it might kill you, maybe don't do that. If you're going to lose an arm if something goes wrong, maybe don't do that. There's a famous magic effect, the bullet catch, right?
Yeah.
Somebody loads a gun, fires it at the magician, they catch the bullet in the teeth. Several people have died attempting a bullet catch over the years. And as an aside, the first confirmed woman to perform a bullet catch on stage complimented one of my magic tricks. And I was like, I can
Oh.
die now. My needle swallow. I did a needle swallow last year on Halloween.
Oh boy.
And it was literally this needle. I keep it.
Oh wow.
Still
Fantastic.
threaded from, it's like you swallow the needle, you swallow the thread, people are looking in your mouth, you drink water in between, and then you pull the thread out and the needle is threaded on.
Amazing.
I showed the clip from my Twitch stream to all these magicians, and this woman who was like famous to me because she's the first woman to be verified as having performed a bullet catch, was like, that was great. I'm like, yes.
Awesome.
But
Wow. Congrats.
and it's the same thing. I was like, I need something to do on Halloween. Wouldn't it be stupid if I did a needle swallow?
That makes sense.
And I brought it up on my stream, and everybody was like, "Do not do that." And I was like, "Well, okay, now I'm doing it."
Now I gotta do it. Now I gotta see
Because
if it'll work.
everybody is like, "Don't do that. It's dangerous." And it's like, I know it's not really dangerous. Like, obviously, it's magic. Like there's things happening that are not what you think are happening. It is still dangerous because you are putting an actual needle in your actual mouth. Okay, true. But it's as safe as it can be under those circumstances. And so I just, again, it was like a joke, It's
Yeah.
like, nobody wants me to do this, I'm going to do it.
Okay, well then I'll amend that advice is not necessarily planning the thing, but planning that step. Maybe planning
The
step
next
one.
step.
Let's do step
It's
one.
always the next step.
And
Yeah.
hey, if it's going okay, then let's
Just
see if we
start.
can take it another level. Honestly,
Yeah, just start. I'm a
I've had-
bad
yeah?
person to take advice on that specifically, because I'm bad at finishing things. I'm really bad at finishing
Oh, yeah?
things. And
Wow.
that's something I've been struggling with my whole life.
I feel you. I understand it.
So if you're the kind of person who wants to, for instance, write a novel, don't listen to me, because I've had the same novel stuck for 20 years.
Oh,
But
really?
if you just want to try a thing and see where it takes you, then yeah, maybe you can listen to me, because that's what I always do. And it leads to interesting places, but it's not always where I want to be, I guess.
I'm thinking about what you've said, and I think about the things that when I've been able to do something, and it is oftentimes that same sort of strategy without me really realizing it. Like Twitch is a thing like that. It's like, oh, here's an idea. And I was like, there is a lot here. Like when I went to Twitch, I wasn't expecting the amount of, like, you go to the creator dashboard and it's like, oh, there's 300 things here. I wasn't expecting 300 things, and I had, then I'm going to research cameras and lights and all this stuff. And it's like, there's a lot there, but I was like, okay, what could I start with? How could I get going? And I started to go further and further, and I didn't really expect much. And then I found myself actually kind of behind the game, because I wasn't expecting really anything from it. And it started going a little better, a little quicker than I thought. Same thing with writing a novel though. The last novel that I'm working on, I did the first draft in 30 days. I did 2,200 words every day. And the idea is you sit down and you write.
Okay.
And that first draft, honestly, like, I'm probably going to throw a lot of it out, because you have to just sit down and write, unfortunately. And some of those days you're not a genius and it doesn't go that well. And somehow it's not coming out of your head. And maybe you add some character you shouldn't have added, and now it's awful. And so this is what it's going to be. That first one just ends up, you want it to be good right away, but it just won't be. So now you have to take it day by day. I'm going to sit down, I'll write about this much, and that's how much I'm going to write. And now I've only planned a day. And I only have to do that today. And I don't have to, if I decide I want to do this tomorrow, I guess I won't. But
Interesting.
I want to finish this thing, so that's what I'll do. And I went from writing novels that it took me 2 years to write the first one that I did, 2.5 years or something.
Okay.
And then the second one I did it in a year. And then it was like I wrote a bunch of comic books and I decided, hey, what if I turn these into just trailers so I'll learn animation? I didn't need to do all that. There was no need for that.
Right.
But I wanted to see if I could do it, so I did it. And
that's awesome.
You know, I feel like that's the thing though, but I just was like, okay, what can I learn today that's going to maybe get me a step forward? Or how much can I just write today and it'll get me that step forward? Or Twitch, I'll just, you know, I'll start a stream. I'll read these comics. Nobody's going to be there for sure. 0 people are going to be there every time. That's what I thought. But I'll do it because I want to. And then people were there. So yeah, no, honestly, I really think that each time things have worked, or even exercising or losing weight, all those kinds of things, it's the same thing.
Yep.
Like, hey, can I get to the end of the week and just do this well today and maybe get to the end of the week doing this? That tends to be the way to go. You know the long-term goal. Like, I mean, you know what the big goal could be, but you don't have to think about that every second. I think that does discourage you.
That's, I mean, I agree with all of that. And it made me think of what it was like when I started running longer distances. Because it was very much there's no way I can run 10 miles, but I can run a mile. And at the end of a mile, I can probably run another mile. And actually, the first time I ran a 5K, I was not intending to run a 5K. I just started running around a track and, you know, I was tracking the distance. And at the end of the first mile, which is about as far as I'd ever run, really, before, I was like, I still feel like I can keep going. Let's just see what happens. And I just kept going. And then at the end of 2 miles, I was like, I'm pretty tired, but I think it might be a bad idea, but I might be able to keep going. Let's try 2.5. And I get to 2.5 and I was like, well, a 5K is 3.11. I mean, there's no point in stopping now. I feel like I can do it. And I just did it. I don't recommend that this is the thought process people take when running, because I'm also really good at injuring myself by doing that. But that first time I did it, I got lucky and I wouldn't have done it otherwise. Like, I know people who plan, like I've got friends who do the whole like couch to 5K thing. I don't think that would work for me. What worked for me was just starting it and then at certain intervals, just saying, well, I'm just going to go another, 0.2 of a mile and see how I feel. Oh, I can keep going? All right, great. And then eventually I got to the point where I was like, well, I'm not stopping now because it's less than half a mile to go. I'm just going to do it, that kind of thing. Terrible idea, but it works sometimes. If you get lucky, you don't get injured,
Yeah, I mean, you do build momentum that way. That is true.
Yes.
Like, because if you maybe didn't have so much momentum, or now there's not pressure. It's like, oh, I have to get to this 5K thing, and I don't know how I'm ever going to do that. And that can be a mental downward spiral, I think.
Sure.
So like,
yeah.
It's like, okay,
that's
well,
one of the reasons I probably will never run a marathon.
Because that's too much.
It's unlikely I'll ever run a marathon.
Wow.
It's not really important to me, but it is one of those things that's like, well, the most I got was I ran 18 miles once, and I didn't intend to. I was supposed to stop at 16. Wow. And I was just about to stop. I was running around a pond. It's about 2.5 miles around a pond nearby. I used to run there all the time. And I was just finishing up. It was like getting dark. It was, I think the 16 was the furthest I'd ever run. I was feeling good. It's like, I did it. Great. And then a guy coming in the other direction, looking frantic, is like, have you seen a little black and white dog? And I was like, no. And I guess I'm not stopping. You keep going this way. I'll keep going this way, and we'll meet up at some point and we'll try to find your dog. And I kept going, and I was I hadn't stopped. Like I never stopped to walk or anything. It was running 16 miles, and then I kept going. And I didn't even know the dog's name. I'm literally laughing while running around the pond in the dark, yelling, "Here, little black and white dog." I mean, I didn't even know what to call out, but I was so, I was loopy at that point because I didn't stop. I didn't have food, water, anything. I didn't stop for it. I just kept going. But I went 18 miles. I got all the way back around and I never ran into the guy again. So I choose to believe he found the dog and they left, because I made all the way around, never ran into him again. So yay. But that was the most I did, was 18 miles. And it was not by planning to run 18 miles. So again, that's the kind of thing, like if I have to plan a marathon, I feel like I'm never really going to do it. But if I slowly build up and eventually get to the point where I run 20 miles, I might just be like, how do I feel? Let's try another time around. Now I'm at 22. How am I doing? Let's keep going. Let's see what happens. If I run a marathon, it's just going to be me running around a pond. I'm not going to run in a marathon. That would never happen. I'm never going to run with a bunch of people. It's just totally bizarre to me that people do that. If you love it, great, do it. But to me, that's never going to happen.
I think that makes a lot of sense. If you examine yourself, you know the kind of person you are, you know that maybe this way might work for you better. And you're going to end up actually doing some of this stuff. Like, hey, if you ran 26 miles or 26 and a half miles around a pond, you ran 26 and a half miles. Or if you ran it in a marathon, cool, but that's not different, in a sense. So,
well, yeah, it doesn't mean anything to me personally. If it means something to somebody else, that's great. My ex ran a marathon. Awesome. And I'm super proud, amazing. But one of the reasons, I mean, I really, I feel like there's Eastern cultures that my mother always told me. My mother's from Taiwan. Her mom's from Japan. She always told me that there's the belief that people are one of three types of people. You're either a flower person, a mountain person, or a water person.
Okay.
I don't know if this is true or if this is something she made up. I have no idea. But I've carried that with me a lot. And I'm definitely a water person. Which is interesting because the last time I swam, I was 17. I don't like swimming, but I like being near water. I feel a kinship with water and large bodies of water and moving water and things like that. And running around the pond helps me because I'm like, there's water right there. Like I feel good being next to the water. And I think it may have been on that 18-mile run. It was definitely on a long run around the pond. At some point, I remember thinking, I'm not the mountain, and I shouldn't be the mountain. I'm the water that eats the mountain. And the whole canyon kind of thing, like just. And Bruce Lee had that whole thing, be water and all that,
sure.
Which wasn't in my mind at the time. But, I mentioned this to somebody later and they're like, oh, yeah, like the Bruce Lee be water thing. I'm like, yeah, yes, kind of. But it was more just like, the mountain is not what wins. If you pit water against a mountain, you just got to wait. Eventually, the water wins. The water washes that mountain away. It just takes a long time. And you just don't look, don't look at the fact that it's going to take a million years. Just be that force that is slowly doing what it needs to do. Chip away at things.
That's awesome.
I don't like to look always at the big picture because it just paralyzes me. I'm just like, what do I need to do today to get to tomorrow? Sometimes that's great. Sometimes it's not. Right? If you lose the big picture, bad things can happen. But
man, you've given me some things to think about. I think I'll definitely take that back with me and try to incorporate it a little bit more because like I said, it just does flash into my mind that a lot of things that I've done that have been successful or that are working at all, does tend to be that sort of an idea where you're just pushing, you have a concept that it can go far. I mean, or that it could go a million miles if you want, but we're not going to think about that. Let's just stick with this. Let's go forward that way. That's pretty cool. I appreciate that. I appreciate that advice.
Well, the thing, so the website that I ran, the As the Apple Turns thing, at some point we had,
that is funny.
Because the big joke about that was quantity over quality, because again, I was writing like 1,500 words a day for this website. And at some point we had this thing called the Melville Index.
Okay.
Which was, again, I had this entire thing database driven, which meant I could export all of the content I'd written into a text file and run a word count on it and compare it to the word count of Moby Dick by Herman Melville, which is public domain, and you can just get the text file. So at some point the Melville index was something like, I don't know, 9.6 or something. I'd written like 10 times as much as is in Moby Dick for this dumb website that was originally a throwaway joke about how, you know, the news media was treating the story of Apple as a soap opera.
Wow.
And it turned into something that was 10 times the length of Moby Dick. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
It is funny.
But people still write to me about it. I'll still get email out of the blue. And they're like, any chance it's coming back? I'm like, no. I mean, you can read the old stuff, but nothing new is happening. I mean, for one thing, Apple is one of the biggest companies in the world now. You know, it's not the same story.
No, it's a different thing. It's a different thing. Yeah. I get it.
But anyway.
You know, okay. So I will ask you this question that I was going to ask you some time ago. And then I don't know if you feel like gracing us with some magic or not, if you had something in mind.
We could try it. I'm always up to try a thing. Yeah, I'm always up to try a thing. I might show you. Yeah, I might. I can probably. I was thinking maybe we do a thing where I can kind of illustrate some of the concepts I was telling you about, how the way magic works and why it might behoove people to learn more about how magic works, because it's kind of the way you get controlled. You get controlled in your day-to-day life. Everything you see, all the information coming in, a lot of that, a substantial portion of that, is being engineered by people who are trying to sway your decisions. And so maybe we do a thing that illustrates that. We'll try it.
I'm all
but
for
yeah,
it.
Ask away. Let's see what we get.
Okay, so this is the question that I tend to ask. It's a bit of a left turn from what we've been talking about, but I feel like, you know, you do have a lot of things. Like there's the poetry, there is all of these. There's magic and there's music and there's theater and there's a lot of things that you have an interest in, as well as, of course, there's the scientific side, the programming side, the technical side, the physical side, you know, and this idea of water we just talked about. And so again, what I was looking for in doing this podcast in the first place is trying to find beauty, trying to find if we want to talk about Marilyn Manson, the beautiful people, if you want. Okay. But and just getting an idea of what people who have done things maybe a little bit differently than what a lot of you generally would think of as being a regular life, if we want to even say that. Not that there is such a thing, but if you wanted to say like, hey, this might be a little off the beaten path, all these different things. And then what is the concept of beauty mean to these people? So that's what I'm asking you is, when you think of beauty, just simply think of the word. What comes to mind? What would be your idea of beauty, or your explanation of it, if you had to try to give one?
The first thing that comes to mind when you bring that up is interesting to me, because it wouldn't have been what I would have thought would spring to mind. But I am not a religious person. I am not a philosophical person per se. Certainly not. I don't read philosophy. I don't research what other people have thought about these things. But I have a very, very glancing blow sort of brush with Taoism. And there's a famous painting, I guess, it's more, if it were a magic trick, it would be called a plot instead of a trick. Right. So in magic, we've got like the oil and water plot, where you've got black and red cards mixing and unmixing, but there's a million different tricks that use that. So that's a plot as opposed to a trick. So there's the vinegar tasters, apparently, in Taoism, which is a picture of three men tasting vinegar. And they have different expressions on their faces. And I guess somebody's going to be like, that's not what that is. But it's fine. In my mind, this is what I think about it, and this is why it came up to me when you mentioned beauty. You've got one person whose reaction is one of bitterness, tasting something bitter. Another person whose reaction is tasting something sour. They're supposed to represent like Confucius, and I can't remember, but it basically the idea of Buddhism, or strict adherence to rules. But the third taster is supposed to be the Taoist, I guess, who just has like this beatific look on his face where he's appreciating the flavor of the vinegar for what it is. It's not that the vinegar tastes sweet, it's that you can appreciate that vinegar exists and it tastes this way. And to me, I think that's when I heard about that as a young person, I think that's kind of what it crystallized the notion of beauty to be, because I like a lot of things that people find ugly.
Mm.
I'm a big fan of vocalists that a lot of people can't stand. I love Bob Dylan's voice. I love Lou Reed's voice, even if he's not carrying the tune. I collect voices, and some of them are very beautiful in a traditional sense, like Keely Smith. We've talked about Keely Smith, but also, Tom Waits, things like that. What did Bowie say about Dylan? He had a voice like sand and glue. I love that. I love that. I think that's a beautiful image, but it's describing something that is not conventionally beautiful to describe a voice, that sort of thing. I think it was Hazel O'Connor, maybe, who was criticizing Brian Eno's music because she says it's like drinking a glass of water. I'd rather drink razor blades. To me, that is a statement about beauty. And yeah, I like horror movies. I like punk music. I like things that rub against the grain. I like things that break outside of boundaries. But I also like things that are traditionally beautiful. The important thing to me is appreciating things for what they are, or trying to. If that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense.
So
that makes a lot of sense.
So things, I think you find that in a lot of art. You've got art that is ugly but not ugly. It is definitely, and that's what it's trying to do. It's trying to show people. It's holding up a mirror. It's like, yes, this is a picture of a rotting carcass, a rotting animal carcass. This is a painting of a rotting animal carcass. Aren't you surprised by your reaction to it? Because I've managed to make you think it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Maybe I didn't succeed with everybody, but maybe one person is like, you know what? You're right. That is beautiful. And maybe I'm going to start looking at ugly things in a different light. So I tend to have unconventional tastes. I like things that are asymmetric a lot of times, but when I'm making something, a lot of times it ends up symmetrical. Like there's a lot of contradictions there, but I think it makes sense. I like things that are conventionally beautiful, and I like things that a lot of people would consider ugly. It all comes down to just appreciating the vinegar for what it tastes like, I think.
I think you're right on. I mean, that tends to, it's funny that does tend to be a theme when I ask this question, actually, is that of course, one of the very first people that's been on this was a person named Vicky Clarici, who's AKA Makeup Billy, who does special effects makeup, right? And so she's making
I saw part of the return stream.
The hideous
podcast
for season 2. I had her back, and so she makes these horrendous masks, right? They're essentially what you would call ugly and horrific and whatnot, but she's doing it with skill and beauty, and therefore, now where are we? And also a lot of times when she's taking pictures or whatever, they try to take these great images that are excellent, and therefore now we've got beauty. And so I don't think. And also, when I do talk to her as well, or when I talk to you, or I talk to anyone, I don't expect anybody to be in some box like you're the magic guy or something, and that's got to be the only thing you'd ever do, just because, or that's the only thing you ever think, or you're vegan, so you must hate everybody who eats meat. Like, no, we don't. Oh, you like asymmetrical stuff, so you can't look at a circle, like, no, you're allowed to. You're allowed to like all of it. And I do think that's an amazing thing to say, is that incredible, that painting. That sounds incredible, because this is vinegar. Now we could say it's sour. We could say it's bitter. We could say it's vinegar. And
Right.
maybe there's the beauty in that. There's the beauty in it being what
That
it
was,
is.
yeah.
Life is kind of like
That was
that.
one of the things that when I read anything about Taoism, that was the sort of thing that appealed to me about it. The notion that you can see things for what they are and you can appreciate them for what they are. They don't have to be beautiful to be beautiful. They don't, nothing, and it doesn't matter what you think about them. They are what they are. So you can either rail against it or you can appreciate it is what it is. And, it's the kind of thing people are, a criticism of that might be, well, then you're just going to accept things without changing them for the better. And that could be a trap to fall into. I think that's a legitimate concern, but at the same time, you're not going to change the weather anytime soon.
Mm.
So can you maybe appreciate the storm instead of just making your life worse by hating it? It's a tool. It's a tool of perspective. The notion that, and you can be reductive and say, give me I don't even know the quote that gets overused, like, God give me the strength to change the things I can and to accept the things I can't, whatever. It's a similar idea, granted, but I think it's more about observing the nature of something in and of itself, right? Being able to, it's almost like Marcus Aurelius, right? First principles, like what is it in itself? And then being okay with that, I think Taoism is a common sort of image is the stream that flows around the rock, and it doesn't get stopped by the rock. It just goes around the rock. It's fine. You accept you're not going through that rock, go around it. And so, yeah, in the middle of that, well, towards the end of a long run around the pond, I remember suddenly realizing, and it was enough of a thing where I actually translated it into Chinese, turned it into Seal script, and I have it ready to be a tattoo someday when I go back. But the notion of I am not the mountain, I'm the water that eats the mountain.
Yeah.
Strong. And very specifically that notion that, it's an interesting image to me because the mountain and the water are not fighting. There's no war between water and a mountain. So there's nobody's winning, but it is true. The water eats that mountain. That is just a truth. You give it enough time,
it will happen.
It will happen. So to me, that was like very much this is how you do something big. This is how you do something long. This is how you do something you can't see the other end of.
Yeah.
You're not the mountain. Just you're the water that eats that mountain, and you just keep going. Just try it. Keep going. See what happens. And if you keep at it long enough, you either dry up or you eat the mountain.
One of the two, and you get to find out which.
Either way, it is what it is.
Awesome. That is awesome. All right, you know what? I really like this idea of you go if you have the time and if you care to do this. That's what I will say.
Yeah, totally. Let's try it. Let's
going
try
through these concepts and see if it works or no.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if this will work, but we can try it. And that is always what I say on Twitch. It's like, well, we'll give it a shot. We'll see what happens.
And I guess at this point, anybody who's listening might want to go to YouTube and watch because it'll probably be more fun to actually see. So I'll say that.
We'll see. Yeah.
Or if things go wrong, don't. Just listen and enjoy.
You bring up a really interesting point. What if we can turn this into something that works over audio? There are magic tricks that work 100% over audio. I don't have any ready, but maybe we can make this into something that still works even if people are just listening.
If we can, we can. No pressure.
Let's try it.
All right.
Shall we? I haven't planned this out, but let's just try it. So what I wanted to talk to you about in the context of this is, you mentioned before briefly the notion of people who use these techniques to sort of flim flam people,
Oh,
right?
okay,
The
yeah.
idea that it's not a trick. I have real powers. And if you give me enough money, I'll contact your dead husband for you.
Mm,
And I hate that stuff. Um, and I don't want to belittle anybody's beliefs. That's important to me. I do not believe in any of that.
yeah.
And part of the reason is because I know a lot of people who make people believe these things by using the same techniques I use.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they don't exist. It doesn't mean that, it just means that I have seen no evidence, no credible evidence. There have been people who have, been offering literally $1 million for anybody who can produce credible evidence, and nobody's
That's right.
collected in
That
decades.
incredible
So the
magician,
James
right?
Randi thing, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's it. The Randy. That's right. Yeah, the
yeah.
Magnificent
So
Randy, or oh, okay, I'm sorry. I can't.
probably, yeah. I just
I,
think of him as James Randi, but
James Randi. Well, yeah, he had that out forever, and it's yet
yeah,
nobody can prove that they are legitimately a psychic. I'm kind of on the same
right.
team as you there. It's not a team. It's just that's the belief, and of course, maybe it's possible that somebody is a real psychic, and that's just the truth. But a lot of times, it's a con job, and that is also true.
The thing I tell people is, if you believe that, I'm not putting you down. I'm just cautioning you. If anybody's asking for money,
Then yeah,
then be on your guard, because that's a danger sign. So that's all I would say.
okay.
So in that vein, I'm going to ask you, Rick, do you have a notion of what you would consider the difference between influence and mind reading?
Influence and mind reading. Do I even have a notion of what I would consider the difference between? I
Yeah, because
suppose
it's not the kind of thing people think about usually,
I certainly don't
unless
think
you're a
about it,
magician or a mentalist.
but I'll say what I'm thinking right now is that
Sure.
influence is something that is coming from an external source. Like you would be saying something to me, conditioning me, maybe priming my brain to be sympathetic to a particular direction. And then mind
Okay.
reading would probably, I guess, I don't know if that exists or not, but I would say mind reading is of the vein of you didn't say anything, I didn't say anything, we couldn't know anything, and you've pulled the thoughts from my head and you've been able to literally read them like a book, and now you can speak them back to me. That's the kind of thing I would say the difference would be.
Okay. I agree with you, and we can illustrate this. We can condense that. Um, Here's what I propose. I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, and then go. So it'll be 1, 2, 3, go. And on go, I just want you to say the first word that pops into your head. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Popcorn.
Oh, sorry, I didn't say it.
And
I apologize.
yeah. What were you thinking though?
um, I was all over the place a little bit with that. To be honest, I might have. I thought of four things. I thought of that's kind of the way it is. I thought of like four words. Real quick.
Can you go back to the first thing?
The
I'm
first
curious.
thing, I actually might have thought popsicle. I
Okay,
realized.
so
So it
if you
was
had
kind of
actually said
close.
popsicle and I said popcorn, I would have
Yeah.
just said, "There you go. I'm a
Yeah.
miracle worker." It was close enough. Generally, what happens is I always say popcorn. Nobody ever says popcorn. If anybody says popcorn, I'm just going to say, and I'm done.
Okay, yeah.
Enjoy.
I apologize. I screwed that whole thing up.
Oh
But
no, it's
yeah,
fine. Yeah, yeah.
I certainly wasn't going to say popcorn, and none of the words I thought of
Yeah.
were popcorn. I thought of purple, I
But
thought of green, and I thought of go, and I thought of popsicle. So I
oh,
guess no.
interesting.
Yeah.
Because those could all be colors of popsicle. But we'll go with popsicle because it's closest to popcorn. It's a food and it begins with pop. But
Let's do.
really, I do this as an illustration to show the difference between influence and mind reading is that mind reading doesn't exist. In my mind, mind reading is not a thing. Because if it were, I would have said popsicle.
Yeah.
I
No.
didn't say popsicle because I can't read your mind. Influence exists, right? As you say, it's an external thing that can bend somebody to a specific thing. So I like to think of it this way. If you and I were in a car, if you were at the wheel and I were in the passenger seat, and we were just out for a drive, you didn't have a specific destination in mind. You're just driving. If I could subtly influence your turns, right and left, I might theoretically be able to get you to a specific location. Okay?
Okay.
And if I had written down that specific location beforehand and put it in a sealed envelope and managed to get you to pull up to there and handed you that envelope and you opened it and you saw that I had written down where you wound up, that would look like mind reading. But it wouldn't be. It would be an example of influence.
Yeah.
So let me see if this works with my screen here.
Okay.
Now, I may disappear because I'm usually in the corner, but as long as you can see my hands, I guess that's the most important thing.
We absolutely can.
Okay, yeah. So let's try this. We're going to take a deck of cards. And let's think about this. I'm going to predict... All right, I'm going to predict a card.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to predict a card. And we're going to leave that prediction here. Okay?
Okay.
And we probably aren't going to need that again. That's fine. I'm going to try to get you to arrive at the card I predicted. And it's going to look like mind reading. All right?
Okay.
So here's what we're going to do. If you were here, I would ask you to cut the cards about halfway. All right? Instead, I'm going to, this is one of those things we always have trouble doing this over Twitch because, like, how are we going to have you pick a specific card? I'm going to start by shuffling, and I want you to think of a number, let's say between 10 and 40.
Okay, between 10 and 40.
All right, let me cut those as well. And give me the number, just say the number. I'm going to deal down to that number, and that'll be your card.
22.
22.
It's a lot of counting.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. All right. Did that seem like a fair choice to you?
It seemed absolutely fair to me. I couldn't see
seemed
what's
very
unfair
fair.
about it.
I shuffled the cards. I cut the cards. I asked you for a number. I dealt down to that number. I put the card aside. This is your card. So I'm going to ask you now why you felt that was fair. Because I'm going to point out all the ways it wasn't fair.
Okay.
Okay? We were talking about influence and how it could look like mind reading. First of all, let's take a look. Let's see what you got, okay? You have a queen of spades.
All right.
I made a prediction. That prediction was that you would end up on the queen of spades.
There we are. Amazing.
Now that can look like mind reading, that can look like a magic trick, that can look like any number of things. You thought it was a fair choice. Here's all the ways it wasn't a fair choice. First of all, you didn't get to shuffle the cards. Second of all, I gave you a range of numbers to choose. I said between 10 and 40. So that immediately further restricts you from 52 cards down to, what would that be? About 30.
Yeah.
Right? So we're constraining your choices. And so there's a number of other things that I could explain about how we can get this down to the point where we can get right to Queen of Spades. But I would also point out the fact that we're even using cards.
It's true.
Is something that I chose and you didn't choose. Because even just choosing cards means it's 1 in 52, right? If mind reading were a thing, I wouldn't need to be restricted to 1 in 52 or 1 in 30, or in this case to 1 in 1.
There it is.
Because again, you didn't get to see the cards. I didn't show you the cards. These are all the ways in which, in this case, I could influence you perfectly.
Absolutely.
To choose the Queen of Spades, right?
Fantastic. They were all the Queen of Spades.
Now, that said, Well, that said, though, this is a very broad demonstration of influence. We could also talk about things like neurolinguistic programming, which is saying things to somebody that gets them to choose specific things. We have been having a conversation for almost 4 hours.
Wow, yeah.
And in that course of time, I have done a lot of talking. I've put a lot of ideas in your head, and you've put a lot of ideas into mine. But if influence were a thing, it would certainly be possible that maybe, just maybe, I'd be influencing on a far subtler level than this, which is why, if you were here, I would give you this sealed envelope.
Oh boy.
This is in fact a sealed envelope.
It looks sealed. I see a wax seal on it.
Yeah, there's even a wax seal. This is the symbol I use all the time. I have used for years. It's a doubt point. It was alternative punctuation that was proposed by a Frenchman in the 60s to indicate doubt in a statement.
Wow.
Which I use for many reasons.
That's why on Discord you're the Nexus of Doubt. Fantastic.
So I think you can see inside the sealed envelope there is one business card.
Yeah, I do see a business card.
And if we tip that business card out, if we can, we have to pull it out. There's nothing else in here.
Okay.
Apparently that there's some random piece of cardboard in there, but so this this was 1 in 52, but really 1 in 30, but really 1 in 1, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But in terms of any word that you could have said, if I could have influenced you to say popsicle.
There it is, popsicle.
Yeah.
I must have been influenced to say popsicle.
It only takes 4 hours of conversation to get you to say popsicle.
Well, we got there. There's the it's the trick within the trick within the trick on that one too, because we talked about this.
Yeah.
And that's so awesome. Yeah. That is so awesome. Wow. There's some applause.
Popsicle right up there.
Now,
but
wow.
Yeah, it's the lesson outside of the lesson. So.
Wow, that was fantastic. Thank you so much, Jack. Man, and thank you for this great conversation. I really appreciate it. Thanks for being so generous with your time on this too. I mean, I
enjoyed every minute of it. I really appreciate you just listening to me yammer for almost 4 hours.
Oh, I'm happy to hear your story and some of it, because it is really interesting. And I think, honestly, I do feel like, I hope that people get something out of it or whatnot. I know I get something out of it at the very least. So yeah. we are going in that direction. So no, I'm very happy to have had the conversation. I appreciate it. I can't wait till your next stream. I say this in my streams all the time. Everybody follow InfoZar. It's info XCZAR or Z if you're.
And now we know why.
Yeah, now we know exactly why. And go be influenced to say popsicle. After literally, that's it. This is taking things too far. That's 4 hours of conversation.
It's taking things too far. It's what we do. It's what we do.
We love it. I had a great time. I certainly appreciate it. Thank you for sharing some of your magic as well. I appreciate that. Yeah, and just being who you are, man. I appreciate it. And really, I'm looking forward to the next stream. And thanks for jumping into my streams too. I appreciate it. So.
Oh yeah, heck yeah. No, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled to be in there. I always have a good time in there. Every time I have to miss it, I'm always angry.
That shocks me. It shocks me. I don't understand.
For one time, I mean, it was a few weeks ago, and again, I missed it because I was at a live thing with people.
Awesome.
And I'm like, I made it wasn't even that I made a decision, but had it been a decision, it would have been the wrong one. I missed a Sci Friday. That's not cool.
Yeah. Well, hey. Well, again, thank you so much. I had a great time. I really appreciate it. You are welcome on this podcast anytime you want. If ever you have things you need to say to people that can't be said on Twitch for some reason, feel free. I really had a good time. So look, I'm going to shut this thing down because I never really know how to to end it. So it's kind of just like, we're ending it. So thank
That's
you
cool.
and ciao ciao.
There's what the heck is it? There's a TV show that I love, Solar Opposites. There's an episode. It's a animated thing by the same people who did Rick and Morty. And one episode, the lead alien becomes a magician, and he's performing on stage. He has no stage presence or anything. He finishes the thing, and he just says, "End of trick." And I love that.
All right.
I feel like that's it. End of trick.
Okay, well then, end of trick.